Chapter 947. What a prodigal act. A high-level great emperor expert? Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he stared at the cold man. Although he knew that the man was an emperor, he didn't expect him to be so strong. The white-haired middle-aged man was a great emperor on the same level as the flame emperor, but he fell flat on his face in the face of this man's aura. The difference between them was too great. The imperial power realm was divided into 9 levels. The first 3 levels were low-level, the middle 3 levels were mid-level, and the last 3 levels were high-level. This meant that the cold man was a 7th-level emperor. Everyone knew that the difference of a single minor level in the imperial region was like the difference between heaven and earth. Furthermore, breaking through to the next minor level was much harder than breaking through to the 4th level. This was also the reason why there weren't many great emperors in the eastern lands. Of course, this was only relative to the huge number of cultivators in the eastern lands. In the 9 nether realm, emperor realm cultivators could be found everywhere. However, high-level emperor realm cultivators were not that easy to find. This was because only 1 in 10,000 cultivators could cultivate to the high-level emperor realm. To put it bluntly, if this indifferent man faced Emperor Qing, he would only need 1 move to kill Emperor Qing. The middle-aged man quickly got up and cupped his hands at the cold man. "Thank you for your mercy. I'll leave now." With that, the middle-aged man scrambled away from the stall. The Emperor Realm expert was scared to such an extent in front of the cold man. This showed that the cold man was extraordinary. The indifferent man did not pay any attention to the middle-aged man who looked like a stray dog. Instead, he stood in front of the stall again and pointed with his right hand. A palm-sized light screen floated above the broken spear. The light screen recorded the price of the spear, 1 million high-grade spirit stones. After doing this, the cold man sat cross-legged on the stall as if nothing had happened. He closed his eyes and ignored the surrounding cultivators. Perhaps it was because the cold man had forced a low-level Emperor Realm expert to retreat with a shout, so more people gathered around. Among them, there was no lack of powerful Emperor Realm experts. However, when the gathered cultivators saw the unrecognizable spear on the stall and the price on the light screen, they all shook their heads. No one called out a price. Although an emperor weapon was precious, it was damaged to such an extent. At most, it had some research value. Many people felt that it wasn't worth it to pay 1 million high-grade spirit stones for such research value. Therefore, although the stall here was as crowded as a marketplace, no one opened their mouth to make a bid. The atmosphere was extremely strange. Zhuan shook his head and thought, this person is really arrogant. He just put the spear on the stall and didn't care about it. Why would anyone buy it at such a high price? Although Zhuowen himself was also a spear user, the damage to this spear was too horrible to look at. Coupled with the terrifying price, Zhuowen did not participate in the bidding. After all, in his opinion, buying this broken spear was not worth the loss. Could buy this spear? Suddenly, Xiao Hei's voice rang out, startling Zhuowen. Immediately, Zhuowen's face turned red and he transmitted his voice to Xiao Hei. "Xiao Hei, what are you talking about? You want me to buy this broken spear? That's 1 million high-grade spirit stones. Kid, you have so many spirit stones on you now. What are you afraid of? It's not like you can't take out 1 million high-grade spirit stones." Xiao Hei said with some displeasure. Zhuowen was speechless. He gritted his teeth and said, "But you can't be so wasteful. Spending 1 million upper-rank spirit stones just to buy such a lousy spear. Isn't this throwing spirit stones away? What do you know? This broken spear is indeed damaged. However, this spear has an extraordinary origin. I suspect that this spear hides some kind of secret." Xiao Hei said seriously. "Extraordinary origin? What extraordinary origin does this emperor weapon have?" Zhuan was startled and immediately asked curiously. If this emperor weapon was really extraordinary, he could spend a lot of money to buy it. Xiao Hei's voice was silent for a moment. Then he smiled awkwardly and said, "Actually, I don't know either. However, my intuition tells me that this emperor weapon is not simple. Don't you believe in my intuition?" Hearing this, Yuan was silent for a moment. Then he roared in his heart, "Intuition? Are you lying to a 3-year-old child? Just because of your intuition, You want me to spend 1 million high-grade spirit stones to buy something that might be a piece of junk? Can you be any more prodigal? Xiao He curled his lips and did not refute. Instead, he muttered in a low voice, "Anyway, it's not my money. It won't hurt to spend it." Xiao He's words almost made Zhuan explode. This prodigal thing really did not know how to speak. However, after calming down, Zhuan began to silently examine the broken spear on the stall. Since Xiao He had said so, it was obvious that this broken emperor weapon was indeed extraordinary. However, no matter how extraordinary it was already broken to such a state. It was no different from trash. Therefore, Zhuan was somewhat hesitant to buy this broken spear. In the process of carefully examining it, Zhuan quickly noticed the patterns on the body of the spear. The patterns had been eroded by time and had become rusty. It was basically impossible to see their original appearance. However, Zhuan discovered that these rusty patterns were not ordinary. Therefore, Zhuan's gaze was fixed on the patterns on the spear. Gradually, Zhuan discovered that the originally blurry patterns began to become clearer and clearer. In the end, the patterns turned into a black rune. This black rune faintly revealed a demonic aura. This is a demonic pattern? Looking at the black rune, Zhuan naturally felt the demonic aura within the rune. This kind of rune could only be carved by a devil. Furthermore, when this demonic pattern appeared clearly in Zhuan's mind, Zhuan discovered that the Buddha demon eye hidden in his sea of consciousness actually trembled and automatically switched to the demonic eye. Wisps of black gas drilled out from Zhuan's glabella. The demonic eye seemed to want to drill out of Zhuan's body and rush towards the broken spear. Not good. I have to stop the Buddha demon eye. Zhuan's expression turned serious. He quickly controlled the powerful mental strength in his sea of consciousness and turned it into thousands of threads. He forcefully pulled back the demonic eye that was about to drill out. At the same time, Zhuan no longer looked at the patterns on the spear body. The patterns on the spear body were demonic patterns that contained an extremely powerful demonic aura. Because Zhuan possessed the Buddha demon eye, he could see through the patterns and see the essence within. The cold-looking man seemed to have discovered something. He frowned slightly and slowly opened his eyes. There was a sharp sword light in his eyes. Then, his gaze landed on Zhuan in the corner of the stall. However, when he discovered that the young man in front of him was only a supremacy, the cold-looking man narrowed his eyes and muttered in a low voice, "What happened just now? I actually felt a powerful demonic aura. Was it an illusion?" The cold-looking man looked deeply at Zhuan, then closed his eyes again, as if there was no one else around. Zhuan, on the other hand, was extremely nervous. This cold-looking man was indeed a high-level Great Emperor expert. He was actually able to sense the demonic aura on him among so many people. Fortunately, he had managed to control the demonic eye in time. If he had allowed the demonic eye to come out, Zhuan would have definitely become the target of public criticism. At that time, he would really be finished. "Xiao He, this broken spear is indeed extraordinary. I've decided to buy it," Zhuan said to Xiao He inwardly. Xiao He had also sensed the abnormality in Zhuan's sea of consciousness. He nodded and said, "It seems that this Dragon Lord's intuition is as accurate as ever. You didn't believe me just now. How sad." Zhuan shrugged and ignored the sighing Xiao He. Instead, he came to the front of the stall and gently stroked the surface of the broken spear with his right hand. Zhuan's actions naturally attracted the attention of countless people around. The cold-looking man suddenly opened his eyes and stared sharply at Zhuan. He said indifferently, "You want to buy it?" Zhuan nodded and said, "I'm also an expert spear user. Furthermore, I've never seen a spear-type emperor weapon before. Therefore, I want to buy this spear and study it properly. Perhaps it can be of help to my spear skills." When Zhuan's words came out, an uproar broke out in the surroundings. Many people stared strangely at Zhuan as if they were staring at a prodigal son. Who is this kid? He's actually so rich to spend 1 million high-grade spirit stones to buy a broken emperor weapon. Isn't that too extravagant? He's a sovereign at such a young age. He's also a rare genius. I'm afraid that he's the young master of some great family and doesn't lack spirit stones. Many people in the surroundings secretly shook their heads, thinking that Jun was simply a prodigal son. However, only Zhuowen knew that this broken emperor weapon actually contained powerful demonic patterns. It was very obvious that this was no ordinary emperor weapon. The cold-looking man's gaze turned extremely sharp as he asked again, "Is that why you bought it?" Zhuowen calmly looked at the former and nodded, "Naturally. Does Senior think that I have the ability to repair this emperor weapon? Do you think that I can repair it and use it for myself after buying it?" When these words came out, many people in the surroundings roared with laughter. How could it be so easy to cultivate an emperor weapon? Moreover, this emperor weapon was broken to such an extent that even if they invited an experienced arcanist, it would be difficult to completely repair it. Zhuowen's somewhat laughable words immediately made many people in the surroundings make up their minds. This kid was definitely a prodigal son who bought this broken emperor weapon on impulse. Many people even maliciously guessed that after this kid bought this emperor weapon, he would soon regret it. The cold-looking man nodded and said, "Since you want to buy it, take out the spirit stones first." Zhuowen didn't mind. After taking out 1,000,000 high-grade spirit stones from his spirit ring and handing them to the cold-looking man, he played with the broken spear in his hand. Wait. Chapter 948. Jian Mu. Everyone followed the voice and immediately saw a group of people walking over from not far away. The leader of this group was a young man with an arrogant expression and a high chin. Beside the young man was a beautiful woman with an enchanting figure and rippling eyes. The lovely shout from before was emitted by this girl. The young man in the lead was unmoved when he sensed the astonished gazes of the crowd. He steadily led the group of people behind him to the front of the stall. He indifferently glanced at Zhuowen and pointed at the broken spear in Zhuowen's hand. He turned his head and said to the girl beside him, "Chun Hui, is this the emperor weapon?" The enchanting woman named Chun Hui purposely rubbed against the young man's arm. Her ample bosom swayed slightly, attracting the attention of many people. She said in a sweet voice, "Yes. I really want to study the structure of this broken emperor weapon. This thing is suitable for me to experiment with." Hearing this, the crowd knew that the enchanting woman's prodigal nature was no less than Zhuowen's. She actually planned to spend 1,000,000 upper spirit stones to buy this broken spear for research. The young man nodded and immediately ignored Zhuowen completely. His gaze landed on the indifferent man and he said respectfully, "Senior, how much is this broken emperor weapon? What's the price?" The indifferent man in front of him had a powerful aura. Even the arrogant young man did not dare to show the slightest disrespect. The indifferent man glanced at the young man and said, "I've already sold this item to this little brother. Why are you looking for me?" The young man was startled and immediately looked at Zhuowen. He spread out his right hand and said indifferently, "This thing is useless to you. Sell it to me at a price." Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. The young man's behavior was somewhat condescending. Moreover, his tone was commanding, giving an unquestionable feeling. This made Zhuowen feel quite uncomfortable. In addition, the young man knew that the emperor weapon was in Zhuowen's hands. He ignored him at first and asked the indifferent man first. After the indifferent man answered, the young man slowly turned to Zhuowen and directly wanted to buy the spear in his hand. Zhuowen raised the corner of his mouth and said indifferently, "If you want to buy this emperor weapon, then buy it with 10,000,000 upper spirit stones." As soon as these words came out, there was an uproar in the crowd. Zhuowen was too greedy. He bought it for 1,000,000 upper spirit stones and now he wanted to sell it for 10,000,000 upper spirit stones. Who would buy it at such a price? Sure enough, as soon as Zhuowen's words came out, the arrogant young man's face stiffened and said coldly, "What did you just say? You dare to sell this broken emperor weapon for 10,000,000 upper spirit stones? Didn't you say that you wanted me to sell it?" Then, the young man of course. Zhuowen of Zhuowen, Chun Hui, Zhuowen and Chun Hui. As soon as Zhuowen's words came out, many people in the surroundings stared at the arrogant young man and Zhuowen with ridicule. In fact, many people had expected that Zhuowen would reject the offer in a disguised way. After all, 10,000,000 high-grade spirit stones was not a small amount. "You mean you don't want to sell it?" The arrogant young man also knew the purpose of Zhuowen's high price. He squinted his eyes and his voice became colder. "Since you can't afford it, then forget it. I'll take my leave. Zhuan shook his head and no longer entangled with the arrogant young man. He wanted to leave, but the young man snorted and blocked in front of Zhuan. What do you mean by this? You can't afford it, so you want to take it by force? Zhuan's eyes flashed coldly and said indifferently. The arrogant young man looked down at Zhuan and said, I'll give you a chance. I'll buy the emperor weapon with 100,000 upper spirit stones. Otherwise, the desolate ancient city is not very peaceful. If you accidentally die here, then the loss will outweigh the gain. Are you threatening me? Zhuan's eyes became colder. This young man thought too highly of him. He dared to threaten him. I advise you to give this broken emperor weapon to young Master Yuanxing. He's the third prince of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty. His status is high and noble. It's your honor to give it to young Master Yuanxing. The enchanting woman called Chun Hui swayed her slender waist and came to the side of the arrogant young man. She snorted at Zhuan. Her voice was so soft that it made people's hearts itch. It's the prince of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty. I didn't expect to meet him in the desolate ancient city. The third prince of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty must have come for the outer court exam of the Divine Academy. Not only the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty, but the other 3 holy dynasties and the 3 major sects have also sent their own powerful geniuses to participate in the exam. As soon as the words of the enchanting woman came out, the whole place burst into an uproar. As one of the 7 most powerful forces in the Eastern land, the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's prestige was deeply rooted in people's hearts. At the same time, many people's gazes gathered on Zhuan. The identity of the arrogant young man was obvious. Would this young man compromise in the face of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's prestige? The arrogant young man, Yuanxing, and the enchanting woman, Chun Hui, were enjoying the envious gazes of the people around them. Then, they stared at Zhuan with bright eyes. They knew that the young man in front of them would definitely obediently hand over the broken emperor weapon after knowing their identity. Unfortunately, Yuan only glanced at the arrogant young man and the enchanting woman indifferently and spat out a word, "Scram." The arrogant young man and the enchanting woman's faces froze at the same time. Even many people around them were stunned. They didn't expect that Zhuan would still ask them to scram after the arrogant young man revealed his identity. The indifferent man who sold the broken spear also looked at Zhuan with interest. He agreed with Zhuan's performance because, in a sense, his character was very similar to Zhuan's. Good. You have guts, but people like you won't live long. The arrogant young man was so angry that he laughed. Zhuan had really touched his bottom line. He wanted this kid to suffer a fate worse than death. Boom. A terrifying aura gushed out. The arrogant young man stared coldly at Zhuan as if he was looking at a dead man. The aura of a golden venerable? Zhuan narrowed his eyes. He was a little surprised by the cultivation of the young man in front of him. The arrogant young man was young, about 23 years old. His cultivation had already reached the golden venerable realm. He was very talented. Just the cultivation of the third prince of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty was far superior to the number 1 genius of the Yanxian dynasty, Mo Lingtian. It seemed that the foundation of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty was much deeper than the Yanxian dynasty. Reckless brat. If you had sold the broken emperor weapon in your hand at the beginning, this wouldn't have happened. Unfortunately, now that the third prince has taken action, you won't be able to keep the emperor weapon in your hand. Even your life will be lost. The enchanting woman crossed her arms in front of her chest and sneered. The moment the arrogant young man released his aura, Yuan was already a dead man in her eyes. The arrogant young man's cultivation should be at the early stage of the golden venerable realm, while Zhuan was at the middle stage of the venerable realm. Although there was a huge gap between their cultivation, Zhuan wasn't afraid. It wasn't as if Zhuan hadn't killed a golden venerable realm cultivator before. Why would Zhuan be afraid of the arrogant young man? It's too late for you to repent now. I gave you a chance before, but unfortunately, you didn't cherish it. So, I'll send you on your way. After saying that, the arrogant young man blasted out a palm. Terrifying yuan force poured out and formed a terrifying gale around him. A huge yuan force palm slammed down, trying to kill Zhuan. Gotcha. However, when the palm made of yuan energy was about to approach Zhuan, It actually strangely collapsed and shattered into countless fine powder. The arrogant young man snorted and retreated. Blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. His hands trembled and the web between his thumb and forefinger cracked. The arrogant young man slowly turned his head and stared at the indifferent man not far away. He said, "Senior, what's the meaning of this? Why did you stop me?" Obviously, this scene was beyond everyone's expectations. All eyes were fixed on the indifferent man. No one had expected him to stop the arrogant young man. "I sold that damaged Emperor weapon to this little brother. Now you're openly snatching it in front of me. What do you think of me?" said the indifferent man indifferently. The arrogant young man's eyes narrowed and were filled with anger. "What? Do you think I'm doing something wrong? Do you feel uncomfortable?" asked the indifferent man again. His voice was getting colder and colder. The arrogant young man was stunned. He hurriedly cupped his fists and said, "I wouldn't dare." The indifferent cultivator in front of him was a high-level emperor. Even the Alcade Holy Dynasty didn't dare to offend him. How could he offend him? "If you don't dare, then get lost." "Don't bother me," said the indifferent man. The arrogant young man's eyes flashed. He stared coldly at Juan and said, "I'll spare your dog life today. If I see you again, I'll take your dog life." After saying that, the arrogant young man led the enchanting woman and the others away from the stall. Juan stared indifferently at the arrogant young man and the others. Then, he said respectfully to the indifferent man, "Senior, thank you for helping me out." The corners of the indifferent man's mouth rose and he said meaningfully, "Perhaps my actions just now were unnecessary." Juan was stunned. Then, he laughed dryly and said, "Senior, you must be joking. I'm just a venerable. I can't be Yuansheng's opponent. If Senior hadn't helped me, I might have died." "Not necessarily." The indifferent man shook his head. Suddenly, he transmitted his voice to Juan. "You're Juan, right? Although you used a secret technique to change your appearance, you can't hide it from me." Juan's eyes narrowed. He stared at the indifferent man and replied warily, "Who are you? How do you know my name?" "You can call me Jian Mu. We'll meet again soon. But to be honest, after seeing you, I'm very disappointed because you're too weak." Jian Mu's voice was filled with disappointment. It rang out in Zhuo Wen's head, and then a terrifying strand of sword qi surged out from Jian Mu's body. Subsequently, it formed a huge sword that was several meters long beneath Jian Mu's feet. Stepping on the huge sword, Jian Mu turned into a stream of light and rushed towards the endless sea of misery in front of the desolate ancient city. Chapter 949. Follow boom. Boom. When Jian Muyu's sword arrived above the sea of bitterness, the pitch-black sea of bitterness actually churned with monstrous waves that appeared high up in the sky. In an instant, the entire desolate ancient city darkened because of such a monstrous wave. How terrifying! Just the monstrous waves of the sea of bitterness possess such terrifying destructive power. Can Jian Mu pass through the monstrous waves? Looking at the monstrous black waves that covered the sky, Zhuowen's face turned pale and his body trembled. The power of the sea of bitterness was beyond his imagination. He knew that if he faced the monstrous black waves, he would definitely die. "Break!" A thunderous voice came from the sky above the huge wave. Jian Mu's eyes were cold as he pointed the sword finger of his right hand at the void. The void behind him shattered inch by inch, and a huge sword that was hundreds of feet long shot out from the spatial crack. There were countless sword qi around the giant sword, and the sword chime was loud and clear. The giant sword slashed the void, and then the monstrous waves of the sea of bitterness were split into two by the powerful sword attack, and they disappeared. Jian Mu did not stop at all. Amidst the countless shattered water droplets, he turned into a stream of light and instantly disappeared into the distance of the sea of misery. Everyone in the desolate ancient city raised their heads to look at the shocking scene. They were all stunned. It was too terrifying. The sea of bitterness that everyone feared was like an ordinary sea in front of Jian Mu. With a slash of his sword, the monstrous waves were annihilated. The sea of bitterness was unable to stop Jian Mu. Is this the power of a high-level Emperor Realm expert? That slash is so terrifying. Even Emperor Qin would fall in front of that slash. Zhuowen was also dumbfounded as he stared at the scene above the sea of bitterness. His heart was unable to calm down for a long time, but he was even more confused. This was because Jian Mu had sent him a voice transmission before he left. Jian Mu is definitely a monstrous genius. He looks to be around 27 years old, but he has already reached the high-level emperor realm. Moreover, he is most likely a sword cultivator. His combat strength is much stronger than other cultivators of the same level. Xiao Hei's voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Even Xiao Hei was full of praises for this Jian Mu. It seemed like this Jian Mu was really something. But brat, how did this Jian Mu know you? To him, you're just an ant-like existence, yet he was able to recognize you with a single glance. Moreover, the words he said before he left were also somewhat baffling. Xiao Hei suddenly asked. Zhuowen shook his head. He was even more puzzled than Xiao Hei. A high-level Emperor Realm expert like Jian Mu was an existence he had to look up to. Moreover, Jian Mu was definitely a genius from the Nine Netherworld realm. It was just that Zhuowen had never been to the Nine Nether realm, nor did he know any martial artists from the Nine Nether realm. The fact that Jian Mu recognized him was indeed a little inconceivable to Zhuowen. When I have the opportunity to enter the Nine Nether realm, I'll naturally meet Jian Mu again. At that time, all the mysteries will be solved. It's useless to think about it now. Zhuowen shook his head and didn't dwell on this issue. Instead, he took advantage of the time when everyone's attention was on the Sea of Agony to quietly leave and come to this stall. Although the Emperor weapon he bought was incomplete, he couldn't rule out the possibility that some people might want to snatch it from Zhuowen when they saw that his cultivation wasn't strong enough. Therefore, in order to avoid trouble, Zhuowen decided to leave this place as soon as possible. Zhuowen's thoughts were naturally good, and he was extremely cautious when he left. Unfortunately, he was still targeted by some people with ulterior motives. Brat, you're being targeted. Xiao Hei's indifferent voice rang out in his mind. I know, but how many people followed me? How strong are they? Zhuowen asked cautiously. Xiao Hei chuckled and said, there are 4 people. 2 of them are at the peak of the sovereign realm, and the other 2 are at the early stage of the golden venerable realm. It shouldn't be too difficult for you, right? Zhuowen shrugged, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He was already so careful, but there were still people who wanted to snatch it from him. Then, they couldn't blame him for being ruthless. First, lead them to a more remote corner. After all, it's not convenient to kill them in a crowded place. Xiao Hei said indifferently. Zhuowen nodded and walked in front silently. He specifically walked towards some of the more remote alleys. Dozens of meters behind Zhuowen, 4 figures followed closely behind Zhuowen. This brat is really courting death. He actually walked towards these remote corners. Isn't he forcing us to snatch the treasure? One of the 4 people behind him, a man with triangular eyes and a gloomy gaze, said to the other 3 people beside him in a low voice. Don't talk too much. Keep a close eye on him. If this brat escapes, don't even think about living. A burly man glanced coldly at the triangular-eyed man and snorted. The latter quickly lowered his head and did not dare to speak. The burly man in front of him was one of the 2 strongest among the 4 of them. He was at the early stage of the golden venerable realm. After being reprimanded by the burly man, the triangular-eyed man lowered his head and did not dare to speak again. However, as he lowered his head, his triangular eyes shone with a trace of resentment. Very quickly, the 4 of them arrived at the entrance of a rather dark alley. After walking forward and turning a corner, they discovered that Zhuowen's figure had actually disappeared. What's going on? We lost him? When the burly man looked at the empty alley in front of him, his eyes narrowed. Then, a trace of blood appeared in his eyes as he stared coldly at the triangular-eyed man behind him. It has nothing to do with me. Maybe that brat discovered us in advance and took the opportunity to escape? The triangular-eyed man quickly explained. The burly man walked slowly to the triangular-eyed man and lifted him up. He said coldly, if you didn't talk too much, would we have lost him? I said that if we lost him, you will pay with your life. A murderous intent radiated from the burly man's eyes. The triangular-eyed man in his hand trembled and begged for mercy. Spare my life. I am willing to atone for my crime and find that brat. Atone for your crime? What a joke. Now that we have lost him and we don't know who he is, how are you going to find that brat? The burly man smiled coldly. Then, Yuan power spurted out from his right hand. The triangular-eyed man's eyes were filled with fear. He could not resist at all, and his entire body exploded into a bloody mist under the terrifying Yuan power. Swoosh! The moment the burly man killed the triangular-eyed man, an air-rending sound swept over and a terrifying smell of blood filled the entire alley. The burly man sensed the air-rending sound behind him and an ominous feeling rose in his heart. Then, he swung his right arm and spurted out Yuan power in an attempt to block the air-rending sound behind him. Poochie! A severed arm soared into the sky as blood spurted out. Then, the burly man screamed as he held his severed right arm and retreated. His eyes were filled with horror as he stared at the figure that was rushing over from behind. A tall and straight figure slowly walked over with a bloody spear in his hand. Waves of bloody aura surrounded his body, causing his figure to be faintly discernible. It's you? The burly man quickly recognized that the faintly discernible figure within the bloody aura was Jun, whom they had been chasing all this time. Originally, they thought that Jun had already escaped. They did not expect that he had hidden himself and wanted to kill them. The other two slowly approached the burly man as they looked at Zhuan with greed in their eyes. They knew that there was a damaged emperor weapon in Zhuan's spirit ring. Moreover, from the way that Zhuan had bought the damaged emperor weapon, they could tell that he was quite wealthy. Without a doubt, Zhuan was a fat sheep in their eyes. The burly man stopped the blood from flowing out of his severed arm as he stared at Zhuan and coldly said, "You've got guts. Not only did you not escape, you actually dared to turn around and kill me. A mere mid-stage supreme being was actually able to sever my arm. You should be proud of yourself. However, the price you have to pay is your life." As soon as he finished speaking, the sturdy man stomped his foot. Terrifying origin energy poured out, causing the entire ground to shake violently. Subsequently, the sturdy man shot toward Zhuan like a bullet at an extremely fast speed. A mere supreme being brat had actually severed his arm. This was undoubtedly a humiliation to him. Therefore this brat had to die. Moreover, he had to die an ugly death. That's right. The price to pay is your life. Unfortunately, it's not me, but you guys. Zhuan smiled indifferently as surging flames of the sun surged out from his body. Then, the huge blazing divine sun cauldron floated above his head. Before the burly man could even react, he was enveloped by the flames of the sun. Royal rank spirit treasure? Who is this brat? He actually has a royal rank spirit treasure? When the other two saw the burly man wrapped in the flames of the sun, their faces were filled with shock. They actually had a faint intention of retreating. If it was an ordinary supreme being, they would naturally be able to capture him easily. However, this one actually had a royal rank spirit treasure on him. Moreover, the grade of this royal rank spirit treasure was obviously not low. They knew that it was impossible for them to snatch the spear from this brat. Did I allow the two of you to leave? Zhuan also noticed the intention of retreating in the eyes of the other two. His cold voice slowly rang out. Then, a huge three-legged jade cauldron that was dozens of feet long flew out from between Zhuan's eyebrows. A loud dragon roar resounded from the jade cauldron. Whir! A huge dragon's might swept out from the jade cauldron. A total of 81 strands of dragon's might appeared and intertwined with each other, blocking the path of the two cultivators who wanted to escape. After being nurtured by the supreme dragon cauldron for a long time, the power of these 81 strands of dragon's might was much more terrifying than before. Perhaps even a golden supreme being would find it difficult to break through the encirclement of the dragon's might. Kill! Zhuan coldly ordered. The 81 strands of dragon's might roared towards the sky and attacked the two cultivators inside. Chapter 950. Magic Pattern Sizzle. The sun's fire gradually subsided, and the corpse of the burly man also turned into ashes. Zhuan's face was expressionless. With a stomp of his foot, he disappeared like a ghost. Without stopping, Zhuan returned to the inn that Emperor Yen and the others had booked. In the inn, Yen Di and the others were not there. They had probably gone out. After all, the desolate ancient city was extremely vast, and there were many things inside. There were many strong cultivators, and it was the first time they had come to the desolate ancient city. Naturally, they wanted to see it. Moreover, Zhuan guessed that Mo Lingtian and the others would definitely go to the street he had just gone to. After all, there were many experts who had set up stalls there. Perhaps they could find some treasures there. Yuan was the best example. The damaged emperor weapon he had found actually contained terrifying demonic runes. The demonic runes were extremely powerful and would most likely be of undeniable benefit to his cultivation of the Tao, entering the Tao through the devil. When he returned to his room, Yuan also found that Xiang Tianzuan and the other 4 people who lived next door were nowhere to be seen. They probably couldn't bear the loneliness and went out. However, Yuan did not blame them at all. Although he controlled the soul imprints of Xiang Tianzuan and the other 4 and made them his slaves, Yuan did not restrict their freedom because of this. For the 5 of them to be able to cultivate to the celestial venerate level, there was no doubt that their talents were strong. Moreover, the physical body that Xiao He had reconstructed was also of good quality. Zhuan believed that the 5 of them would definitely be able to improve their cultivation. Therefore, Yuan allowed the 5 of them to do as they pleased. If he restricted the 5 of them, it would affect their mental state and cultivation. After returning to his room, Zhuan took out a praying mat from his spirit ring. After which, he slowly sat on it and began to meditate. Only after his aura had completely stabilized did Zhuan take out the damaged emperor weapon. Just now, when I was in the stall, the patterns on the spear transformed into a terrifying demonic pattern in my mind, causing the Buddha demon eye to react strangely. I don't know if I can do it again. Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he muttered. Xiao He lazily stood on Zhuowen's shoulder and said indifferently, "Why don't you try and find out?" Nodding, Zhuowen's right hand pointed between his eyebrows. Suddenly, the Buddha demon eye that was hidden in his sea of consciousness emerged from between his eyebrows. At this moment, the Buddha demon eye was actually trembling violently. Originally, the Buddha demon eye was golden on the left and black on the right. At this moment, it was actually faintly shrouded by a pitch-black color, turning into an incomparably black demonic eye. Waves of terrifying demonic aura surged out from the demonic eye. The moment the demonic eye appeared, the pattern on the spear in Zhuowen's hand was suddenly dyed black. The originally blurry pattern became clearer and clearer, and finally, the pattern turned into a demonic rune. Boom! A terrifying demonic aura leaked out from the demonic rune. Then, the demonic aura turned into a black beam of light and soared into the sky from Zhuowen's room. It wanted to break through Zhuowen's room. Not good. We can't let this demonic light beam out. Otherwise, Zhuowen's room will definitely attract countless experts. At that time, Yuan will be finished. Xiao He's expression changed greatly. She stomped her feet and waved her little claws. Suddenly, a pitch-black energy surged out from Xiao He's claws and turned into a black barrier in the room. Boom! The demonic light beam soared into the sky and immediately slammed into the barrier in the room. When the two collided, there was a violent vibration. The barrier that Xiao He had set up trembled faintly. It was on the verge of collapse, as if it was going to collapse at any time. Damn it! Block it for this dragon lord. Xiao He's eyes were cold. She waved her little claws again and wisps of pitch-black energy surged out. The barrier in the room became even thicker and finally blocked the restless black beam of light. What a powerful demonic rune! After the baptism of time, the residual power on the demonic rune is still so terrifying. Who exactly is the owner of this spear? Xiao He stared at the spear in Zhuowen's hand in shock. Her eyes were filled with seriousness. Zhuan also heaved a sigh of relief. When he thought of the demonic light beam that had rushed out of the room, Zhuan did not dare to imagine the consequences. This was the ancient desolate city, where experts were as common as clouds. There were countless heavenly venerables and even emperor realm experts were not rare. If he had made a big commotion, he would undoubtedly be courting death. Even if Zhuan had many trump cards and 5 heavenly venerables, he would still be finished. After a moment of lingering fear, Yuan began to examine the spear in his hand. At this moment, the demonic aura in the demonic eye was surging. The demonic aura enveloped the entire spear as if it was looking for something. This spear actually contains demonic runes. I'm afraid it's an extremely terrifying demonic weapon. A demonic weapon with demonic runes is much stronger than an ordinary emperor weapon. The owner of this demonic weapon is definitely an extremely powerful demon emperor, Xiao He said solemnly. Demon emperor? Demonic weapon? Zhuo Wen's pupils shrank as he muttered to himself. The so-called demon emperor was actually a title given to martial artists who cultivated the demon Dao to the emperor realm. Generally speaking, martial artists who cultivated the demon Dao were much stronger than ordinary martial artists. For example, Demon Dao Master cultivated the ice-cold demonic path. He was only at the initial stage of the heavenly venerate realm, but he had the strength of a peak heavenly venerate. His combat strength was extremely terrifying. As for martial artists who cultivated the demonic Dao, once they advanced to the sovereign realm, they would be able to become demon emperors. Moreover, martial artists who could become demon emperors were basically invincible existences in the same realm. Their combat strength was terrifying. However, there was no such thing as a free lunch in the world. Demonic cultivators obtained strength that was far stronger than ordinary cultivators of the same realm, but at the same time, the difficulty of advancing was several times more difficult than ordinary cultivators. Therefore, the number of demonic cultivators who advanced to become demon emperors was very small. Once they advanced to become demon emperors, their strength would reach an extremely terrifying level. It was enough to make people tremble in fear. In the eastern lands, although Zhuan had heard of the legends of demon emperors, he had never heard of a demon emperor becoming a saint. This was because demonic cultivators were too heaven-defying. The difficulty of becoming a demon saint from a demon emperor was dozens of times more difficult than ordinary cultivators becoming saints. Moreover, there were many tribulations. It was because of these many restrictions that the number of demonic cultivators in the heavenly armor continent was very small. Demon Dao Master was not a complete demonic cultivator. He had only explored a little bit of demonic cultivation. At most, he could be considered half a demonic cultivator. It was said that every generation of demon emperors shocked the world and fought against the world. The emperor weapons used by demon emperors would also be endowed with demonic patterns by heaven and earth. Therefore, the demon weapons wielded by demon emperors were far more terrifying than ordinary emperor weapons. Can the demon eye repair this demon weapon? Looking at the demon weapon shrouded in billowing demon chi, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a hopeful look. Dream on. This demon weapon has already been damaged to this extent. Even if the demon emperor were alive, he would not be able to repair it completely, Xiao He said coldly. Zhuan frowned slightly and said, "Then what is the demon eye doing?" Xiao He's eyes were solemn. She came above the demon eye and carefully examined it. Then she said in surprise, "I'm afraid the demon eye intends to extract the demonic patterns from this demon weapon. These demonic patterns are a powerful imprint condensed by the demon emperor when he was alive. They contain extremely terrifying demon chi, which is very beneficial to the demon eye. Extract the demonic patterns." Zhuan was startled. His eyes were fixed on the demon eye's actions. Buzz. A buzzing sound resounded. This buzzing sound came from the demon weapon shrouded in demon chi. The sound contained a strong sense of sorrow. Demon weapons were supposed to show their value in endless slaughter. However, after countless years, they had lost their master and their drive. They had fallen into depravity in the dust of time. Until today, they had been awakened by the demon chi. "Give me the demonic patterns and I will help you conquer the world again." Zhuowen's eyes flickered. Suddenly, he muttered to the demon weapon shrouded in demon chi. At the same time, he used his mind to control the demon eye to release more and more demon chi. Woo woo woo. The wailing sound became louder and louder. The demon weapon began to hesitate. The demonic patterns were its life and its core. Could it trust the human in front of it? "Do you understand demons?" A sorrowful voice slowly sounded from the demon weapon. "Do you think I don't understand demons?" Zhuan muttered to himself. Immediately, blood chi wrapped around Zhuan. Then, Zhuan turned into blood-red hair and eyes. Waves of demon chi surged out of Zhuowen's body. At this moment, it was as if Yun had turned into a great demon who would not stop killing. In my previous life, I cultivated Buddhism for 3 lifetimes. In this life, I have sought demons for 3,000 years. My demonic blood will burn the sky. I will betray the world but not myself. A faint voice came from Zhuowen's mouth. When the demon weapon heard this, it suddenly fell silent. Then, it let out a mournful wail. Then, a demonic pattern swept out from the billowing demon chi and imprinted on Zhuowen's right cheek. You have a heart that truly seeks demons. Moreover, you also have a demon eye. Perhaps you can really lead this demonic pattern to conquer the world again and let it reignite the demonic power of your previous life. A faint voice sounded. Then, the billowing demon chi slowly dissipated. After losing the demonic pattern, the rusty demon weapon crumbled inch by inch and turned into dust. Demonic pattern? Stroking the black demonic pattern on his right cheek, Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He did not expect the demon weapon to give the demonic pattern to him in the end. What was even more unexpected was that the demonic pattern had directly imprinted on his right cheek. What a rich demon chi! This demonic pattern actually contains such terrifying demon chi. He only felt a burning sensation on his right cheek. Then, waves of terrifying demon chi burrowed into Zhuowen's sea of consciousness, causing Zhuowen's pupils to involuntarily turn pitch black. Could control the demon eye to absorb this demon chi. Xiao Hei's anxious voice sounded. Zhuowen also came back to his senses. With a quick thought, the demon eye floating in front of Zhuowen turned into a black light and burrowed into the depths of Zhuowen's brow. At the same time, the demon chi that had spread into Zhuowen's sea of consciousness was also absorbed by the demon eye. In an instant, the pressure on Zhuowen decreased significantly. This demon eye was indeed powerful. It could actually contain so much demon chi. Perhaps I can use the excess demon chi to cultivate the path of demons. Chapter 951. Sea of Misery Tsunami Sizzle. With the help of the demonic patterns, Zhuowen planned to attack the second layer of the demonic Tao. He knew that once he grasped the second layer of the demonic Tao, his strength would be far more terrifying than before. Moreover, in his demonic state, he could borrow a portion of the blood demon's strength, and this portion of strength could be completely controlled. The second-level demonic Tao Zhuowen was in truth comparable to an Empyrean powerhouse. But the side effects of falling into this demonic state were also obvious. That was that countless thoughts of slaughter would appear in his mind from time to time. These thoughts of slaughter were terrifying and powerful. Zhuowen. Sizzle. Zhuowen didn't care about the blood demon's curses at all. He just silently borrowed the blood demon's power and the demonic energy within the demonic patterns to begin breaking through to the second layer of the demonic path. The blood demon also discovered that the demonic Tao secret technique Zhuowen was cultivating was quite terrifying. He also noticed the demonic mark on Zhuowen's right cheek and the pair of blood-red eyes were filled with fear. At the same time, he also discovered that there seemed to be a powerful demonic eye in Zhuowen's sea of consciousness. How did this lad manage to obtain so many utmost treasures of the Devil Tao in such a short period of time? The might of those demonic marks was torrential, and there was also that terrifying demonic eye. Not to mention that secret skill of the Devil Tao he cultivated. All of these were extremely rare items. To think that all of them would be obtained by this lad. Brat, don't forget our promise. Didn't you say that you would set me free after you reached the Emperor realm? Now, you want to go back on your word and refine my power? The blood demon continued to clamor. Slowly opening his eyes, Zhuowen sneered and said, Blood demon, who is the one who went back on his word? Back when I was fighting with Emperor Qing, you took advantage of my weakness and tried to take over my body when I was severely injured. Since you are so heartless, don't blame me for being unjust. After the battle with Emperor Qing, Zhuowen knew that if he didn't have the blood inheritance seal, the blood demon might really be able to escape from the demon's sealing green coffin. At that time, the blood demon would probably deal with Zhuowen first. Bastard! Back then, I sincerely wanted to help you. Emperor Qing was just an ant at the second layer of the Emperor realm. If you had let me out, I could have killed him in one move. However, you didn't know how to appreciate my kindness. Since you used the blood inheritance seal to forcefully borrow my power, aren't you harming others and yourself in the end? The blood demon said indignantly. His voice was filled with injustice, as if it was all Zhuowen's fault. Zhuowen sneered and ignored the blood demon's protests. Instead, he quietly cultivated. The blood demon was an ancient demon after all. He was cunning and ruthless, and would do anything to get his way. Zhuowen could not be bothered to trust him. After shouting for a while, the blood demon saw that Zhuowen didn't care about him at all. Hence, he quieted down and became silent. Time passed slowly. The sky, which was originally scorching hot, gradually darkened. It was as if a huge hand had suddenly covered the sky. Boom! A thunder-like sound rang out from Zhuowen's room. Then, Zhuowen slowly stood up. At this moment, his entire body was shrouded in a thick blood aura. His flowing blood hair hung down to his waist. Together with his blood-red eyes, he looked extremely demonic. Second layer demonic path. Zhuowen muttered with a smile. After half a day of cultivation, Zhuowen had finally cultivated to the second level of the demon path. Although Zhuowen's cultivation was still at the mid-stage of the sovereign realm, he believed that if he unleashed the power of the second level of the demon path, he would be able to instantly kill a golden venerable. His strength was comparable to a heavenly venerable expert. Slowly retracting the blood aura on his body, Zhuowen's blood-red hair and eyes turned back to black hair and eyes. At the same time, he put away the demon's sealing green coffin. The demonic rune on Zhuowen's right cheek no longer surged with demonic aura. It was as if it had completely calmed down under the control of the demon eye. Although this demonic rune was given to him by the demon soldier, the power of the demonic rune was too profound. Zhuowen couldn't use it at all. Perhaps he would only be able to fully understand this demonic rune when he became an emperor. Only then would he be able to fully grasp its powerful power. Dong dong dong. Gentle knocks suddenly sounded on the door, followed by Xing Tianzuan's voice. Master, dinner is ready. His Majesty, the Flame Emperor, and the others are already waiting downstairs. Would you like to go down and eat? Zhuowen responded and got up to open the door. He followed Xing Tianzuan down the stairs of the inn. Although the inn wasn't big, it was still considered elegant. The first floor was filled with wine tables. Xing Tianzuan led Zhuowen to a large round table. At the round table, the Flame Emperor, Mo Lingtian, Xian Xing, and the others were all seated. Zhuowen's other heavenly venerable servants were also at the table. The table was filled with sumptuous dishes, and the fragrance that wafted out made Zhuowen feel a little hungry. Zhuowen, let's eat together. Mo Lingtian patted the empty seat next to him and smiled at Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded and smiled back. He sat down next to Mo Lingtian, and the others began to eat. At the table, everyone was talking loudly about what they had seen and heard in the ancient desolate city. Therefore, the atmosphere at the table was quite harmonious. Zhuowen listened to everyone with a smile. Zhuowen realized that the geniuses of the Yan Xian Empire weren't as hostile as the geniuses of the Qin Xian Empire. Even Zui Qingfeng didn't like Zhuowen, but he didn't deliberately make things difficult for Zhuowen. Perhaps it was because of the strength and influence that Zhuowen had displayed, but Zui Qingfeng wasn't as narrow-minded as Zhuowen had imagined. Brother Zhua, did you gain anything in the ancient desolate city today? Mo Lingtian suddenly asked Zhuowen. At the same time, the others at the table also focused their gazes on Zhuowen. Among the 5 places, Zhuowen's cultivation was similar to Mo Lingtian's. They were both at the sovereign stage, and he was also the youngest among the 5. It could be said that Zhuowen had a very high chance of entering the Divine Academy in the outer court assessment. Therefore, the Flame Emperor and the others valued Zhuowen. Zhuowen was stunned. Soon after, he spread out his hands and said, I went to the trading area in the south today, but I didn't get anything good. Zhuowen wouldn't blabber about the damaged emperor weapon. After all, it would attract the covetous eyes of many experts, and he didn't want to bring trouble upon himself. Everyone nodded their heads and didn't ask any further. After all, this was the privacy of others, and it would be rude to keep asking. Boom, boom. Just as everyone was happily drinking and chatting at the table, a terrifying tremor spread throughout the entire ancient desolate city. The ground of the inn shook even more violently, and the tables toppled one after another. "What's going on?" Mo Ling Tian asked in horror. Let's go out and take a look." The Flame Emperor's expression was grave as he walked out of the inn and into the open space outside. Mo Ling Tian and the others followed behind him. Not only the Flame Emperor's group, but all the warriors in the ancient desolate city also walked out of their respective residences. They were at a loss as to why the entire ancient desolate city would shake so violently. On the open space, a dense crowd had gathered. These people all looked up at the sky with shock in their eyes, as if they had seen something extremely terrifying. Zhuan also looked up and immediately saw an extremely terrifying scene. The Sea of Bitterness, which was suspended thousands of miles in the sky, was raging. On the surface of the Black Sea, there were countless huge waves and tsunamis. They were like terrifying black dragons that surged into the sky and then came crashing down on the ancient desolate city. On top of the huge waves, there were pitch-black hurricanes. The terrifying hurricanes were like pillars that connected the heavens and the earth. They swept up the seawater of the Sea of Bitterness and swept towards the sky. The thick dark clouds in the sky were swirling under the effect of the hurricanes, forming a terrifying black vortex that swallowed the sky and covered the sun. Rumble! Waves of the Sea of Bitterness surged out and blasted on the light shield of the ancient desolate city, causing the ancient desolate city to tremble violently. Fortunately, the ancient desolate city's seal was extremely strong, and in the face of such a mighty tsunami, it actually withstood it. What a terrifying tsunami! Mo Ling Tian, who was standing beside Zhuan, looked up at the raging Sea of Bitterness. His mouth was slightly open, and his face was slightly pale as he muttered in a low voice. Zhuan nodded in agreement. The tsunami was too terrifying. Zhuan had no doubt that if he was in the middle of the tsunami, he would most likely die. If the tsunami surged into the ancient desolate city, most warriors would not be spared. However, the force behind the ancient desolate city is not simple. They can actually set up such a powerful seal. Zhuan knew that although the Sea of Bitterness was powerful, the force behind the ancient desolate city was also extremely terrifying. A seal that could withstand such a terrifying tsunami was not easy to set up. Moreover, the seal covered such a wide area. He did not know how much material and manpower it took to set up this seal. Chapter 952. The Boundless Sailboat Swoosh. Swoosh. Two figures shot out from both sides of the desolate ancient city and flew into the sky. The aura of these two figures was extremely terrifying. Every move they made was as if countless mountains were crashing down from the sky. Two high-level great emperors? Many of the cultivators in the ancient city of desolation revealed shocked expressions when they saw the two figures flying into the sky. Zhuan raised his eyebrows. The desolate ancient city was indeed extraordinary. It had sent out two high-level great emperors at once. Its foundation was extraordinarily strong. The two figures were rather old. One of them carried a sword on his back and his gaze was as sharp as a sword. The other was empty-handed and was shrouded in a wide black robe. Seal! The two high-level great emperors looked at each other and nodded. Then they formed a complicated seal at the same time. Waves of powerful sealing energy gushed out from the two experts, causing the restrictive barrier above the desolate ancient city to become even stronger and stronger. The restriction that was originally on the verge of collapse became much more stable and sturdy under the support of the two great emperors' sealing power. Many cultivators in the desolate ancient city who were originally quite worried were now relieved. With the protection of two high-level great emperors, the restrictive barrier above the desolate ancient city would not have any problems. Next, on the surface of the Sea of Bitterness high in the sky, the terrifying tsunami became more and more terrifying. The waves were 9,000 feet high, and the crushing power was extremely terrifying. After seeing this even more terrifying tsunami, many warriors' faces became extremely ugly. They knew that if it weren't for the two high-level great emperors reinforcing the barrier with their sealing power, the barrier wouldn't have been able to withstand the roaring waves at all. This night was destined to be extraordinary. The cultivators in the desolate ancient city stood on the open ground and looked up at the raging waves of the bitter sea outside the restrictive barrier. Although the bitter sea had huge waves, it was the first time in many years that it had been so violent. It was a spectacle, so many people did not want to miss the spectacle. Rumble. The surging waves continued until the middle of the night before it finally gradually quieted down. The originally tumbling waves also gradually calmed down. The originally bustling open space also gradually became deserted at this moment. The warriors all returned to their respective rooms and prepared to sleep. The Flame Emperor, Joan, and the others also returned to their respective inns to rest. They were going to cross the Sea of Sufferings on the World's End sailboat the next day, so they naturally had to go back and prepare. The sun rose from the horizon and the curtain of night gradually faded away. The deserted and desolate ancient city became lively again. The Flame Emperor also led the crowd towards the Boundless Tower. When they arrived near the Boundless Tower, they suddenly realized that there was a huge sailboat floating in the middle of the Boundless Tower. This ship was nearly 3,000 feet long. From afar, it looked like a mountain. There were 3 huge sails on the deck of the ship. The pillars of the sails were thick enough for 3 people to wrap their arms around them. It was a spectacular sight. The surface of the ship was shrouded in a strange purple light. This purple light was formed by countless profound purple runes and emitted a mysterious and powerful aura. This ship was the famous boundless sailboat in the ancient city of Desolation. This ship was huge and could accommodate tens of thousands of people. At this moment, there was already a steady stream of people walking up the stairs towards the deck of the ship. In front of the stairs, there were 2 expressionless black-clothed martial artists who were meticulously checking the tickets of the passengers. "This is the boundless sailboat. It's really spectacular," Mo Ling Tian exclaimed. "Let's board the ship," the Flame Emperor said and led the crowd to the deck. Then, they took their tickets and found their own cabins. The Flame Emperor and Mo Ling Tian were in the first-class cabin, which was 1 level below the deck. The 2 of them quickly found their seats and greeted Zhuowen and the others. After leaving their communication marks, the 2 of them entered their cabins. 5 Elements Sects K2 and Myriad Star Palaces Xianxing were in the second-class cabin, which was below the first-class cabin. It didn't take long for them to find their own cabins. Only Zhuowen, the 5 Holy Masters, Zui Qingfeng, and Qing Shuzi had bought third-class cabins. Hence, they spent the longest time searching and found third-class cabins at the lowest level of the ship. When they reached the lowest level, Zhuan frowned slightly. This was because he found that the third-class cabins were located on the smallest level with the most people. Many people were even squeezed in the aisles, blocking the path of many people. Not only Zhuowen, but even Qing Shuzi and Zui Qingfeng also frowned. The third-class cabin's environment was really bad. There wasn't even a proper seat. After walking through the crowded corridor, Nguyen finally found his and Zhang Tianzuan's cabins. As they had bought their tickets together, Nguyen, Zhang Tianzuan, and the other 4 were assigned to the same cabins. "Get lost. We want to use your cabins. If you don't get lost, you'll have to suffer." Before Zhuowen even entered the room, he could already hear the sound of cursing coming from the room he was in. The cursing didn't sound very friendly. Boom. A young figure was kicked out and hit the wall in front of him. The young man was clutching his abdomen with both hands. His face was hideous, as if he was enduring some kind of excruciating pain. "Brother, are you okay?" A clear voice was heard. An innocent girl rushed out of the cabins and came to the young man's side. Her beautiful eyes were filled with worry. "Gatha, don't get involved in this matter. Let me help you solve the problem." The young man smiled and gently patted the girl's head. "Brother, let's not stay in the cabins. Let's just stay in the corridor. We're no match for them." The girl was so anxious that she almost cried. Her brother's strength was too weak. He was no match for those people. Fighting with them was not worth it. The young man shook his head. His eyes were filled with stubbornness. He slowly got up and struggled to rush into the cabins. Boom. Unfortunately, when the young man was about to stand up, a foot suddenly stretched out from the box and fiercely stomped on the young man's chest, causing the young man to groan and spit out a mouthful of blood. He was under the foot and was unable to move at all. 5 men around the age of 25 walked out from the private room. The one in the lead had his hair tied into a crown. He was quite handsome and had a tall figure. It was this man who forced the young man, who was about to get up, back onto the ground. His eyes were filled with mockery. "You're just a little mystique, venerable one. You've got guts. I've already asked you to get lost, but you refused. Instead, you overestimated yourself and tried to chase us out. You're really looking for death," the tall young man said indifferently. "You call me a little black martial artist? Are you really that powerful? You're already 25 years old, but you're only at the early stage of the refined state. Even if you go to the outer courtyard of Asian Academy to participate in the assessment, I'm afraid you won't be able to get in. Furthermore, this cabins belong to me and my sister. You're bullying the weak and trying to take over the cabins. People like you don't have the right to enter Asian Academy," the young man said stubbornly. Good. You've got guts. How dare you say such things in front of me? You really don't know how the word death is written. In that case, I'll teach you a good lesson today, you ignorant brat." The tall young man was so angry that he laughed. He stepped on the young man again, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. His voice became extremely cold. At that moment, Nguyen had also arrived at the door of the cabins. The tall young man and his 5 men had naturally noticed Jun. However, they didn't take Zhuowen and his group seriously. They even ignored Zhuowen and continued to teach the stubborn young man a lesson. The young lady beside the young man was at a loss. She didn't know what to do. Her strength was even weaker than the young man's and she couldn't help at all. "Please make way. Our ticket shows that the cabins behind you are our seats." Zhuowen led Xiang Tianzuan and the other 4 men and glanced indifferently at the tall young man's actions. He didn't intend to meddle in other people's business. Instead, he asked the young man to make way. "Make way? Didn't you hear what I said just now? This cabin is already ours. So what if your ticket shows that the cabins are your seats? If you don't want to suffer, then scram as far as you can." The tall young man glanced indifferently at Zhuowen and said without any trace of politeness. After that, he no longer paid attention to Zhuowen. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "Did you just tell me to scram? Do you dare to say it again?" The tall young man didn't expect Zhuowen to suddenly say such a thing. His right foot that was stepping on the young man's chest also stopped. He then turned his head to stare at Zhuowen and said coldly, "Scram." The young man struggled for a while and said to Zhuowen, "You guys. It's better if you don't interfere. These 5 people have quite a bit of influence in the 3rd-class cabin, and their strength is also very strong." Zhuowen looked at the young man who was being stepped on by the tall young man with some astonishment. He had already been beaten to such a state, yet he still had the mood to remind him that these people were not to be trifled with. Moreover, the young man's stubborn character moved Zhuowen quite a bit. "It's good that you know. Now scram." The tall young man raised his chin and said coldly. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "I'll give the 5 of you a chance now. I'll count to 3. If you don't disappear from my sight, don't blame me for being merciless." When these words came out, the tall young man and the other 4 were all stunned. The stubborn young man was also stunned. They obviously didn't expect that the young man who had just arrived would say such arrogant words. "You want us to disappear from your sight immediately? Is there something wrong with your head?" The tall young man sneered. 1. Zhuowen's eyes were cold and he actually began to count seriously. Chapter 953. Jianan and Gatha. As he spoke, the tall young man let out a furious roar and stomped his foot. The aura of an initial stage sovereign erupted from his body as he instantly arrived in front of Zhuowen and threw a punch at Zhuowen's face. Zhuowen was completely indifferent. Looking at the fist that was getting closer and closer, he continued to count 3. "Since you won't disappear, I'll take the initiative to make you disappear." A cold glint flickered in Zhuowen's eyes as he extended his right hand and grabbed the tall young man's fist. Subsequently, Yuan power gushed out from his palm as a terrifying force was released. Crack! The crisp sound of bones cracking resounded as the tall young man felt a sharp pain in his arm before he lost all feeling in his right arm. My right arm. The tall young man let out a miserable howl as he held his right arm and retreated. He stared viciously at Juan. This person actually dared to cripple his arm. He was simply too hateful. What are you guys still standing there for? Take him down. The tall young man ordered the 4 subordinates behind him who were in a daze. Yes. The 4 of them responded as they released their strongest aura and rushed toward Jun. Their cultivations were even weaker than the tall young man as they were only at the pinnacle of the Xuanzuan realm. Bang, 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 bang. 4 muffled sounds rang out as the 4 of them were sent flying by Zhuan without any ability to retaliate. All of them were badly battered and their auras were weak. Still want to try? Zhuan glanced indifferently at the tall young man as the aura on his body continued to rise. Gusts of Yuan power whirlwinds swept out from his body. Middle stage, sovereign stage? The tall young man's pupils shrank as he cursed his bad luck. He hurriedly left the cabin with his 4 subordinates. The 3rd-class cabins were the cheapest cabins on the boundless sailboat, and they were also the cabins with the worst conditions. Generally, those who purchased these 3rd-class cabins were basically rogue cultivators or disciples of smaller clans who were in dire straits. It was precisely because of this that there were very few young cultivators who had reached the supreme realm in the 3rd-class cabins. This was also the reason why the tall young man could act like a tyrant in the 3rd-class cabin. After all, the majority of the youths in the 3rd-class cabin were not a match for the tall young man. However, Yuan was an exception. He wanted to bring the 5 celestial venerables to the outer court, so the ticket price was 6 times that of an ordinary person. In order to save money, Zhuan resolutely bought a 3rd-class ticket. Thank you for your help, big brother. May I know your name? After beating up the 5 youths, the stubborn youth brought the young girl to Zhuan and asked excitedly as he stared at Zhuan. Just now, Zhuan had defeated the tall young man with a single move, and then easily dealt with the 4 mystique venerables. That kind of strength had truly shocked the youth and even made him admire him. This was because the Zhuan before him was not much older than him. He was only about 20 years old, yet he was already able to possess such terrifying strength. He was definitely a genius. As for the pure young girl beside the youth, she secretly glanced at Zhuan with her large watery eyes. A trace of shyness appeared on her delicate face from time to time. Zhuan rubbed his nose as he looked at the young man in front of him and the shy young girl behind him. He had a good impression of them. The young man in front of him was only about 19 years old, while the young girl was about 18 years old. Their eyes were clear without any impurities. It was obvious that they had not experienced much of the ways of the world outside. They were like blank pieces of paper. My name is Zhuan. I'm heading to the outer court of the Jiashan Academy to participate in the entrance examination. Zhuan smiled faintly. Big brother Zhuan, so you're also here to participate in the outer court examination of the Jiashan Academy. My sister and I are here too. I'm Jia Nan, and my sister is Gatha. The youth giggled. As for Jia Sha, who was hiding behind Jia Nan, she gathered her courage and clenched her fists tightly. She arrived before Zhuo Wen and said in a stuttering manner, "Greetings, Big Brother Zhuo. Thank you, Big Brother Zhuo, for helping my brother beat up those bad guys earlier." Zhuan waved his hand and said, "It's nothing. After all, they were the ones who provoked me first. Let's talk in the private room. There are too many people here." Jia Nan and Gatha nodded. Soon after, the 7 of them entered the private room. It had to be said that the private room was very simple and crude. Furthermore, the area was very small. The 7 of them felt a little cramped in the private room. Zhuo frowned slightly. He didn't expect the conditions in the 3rd-class cabin to be so bad. Previously, he had followed Emperor Yen and the others to the 1st-class and 2nd-class cabins. In those cabins, each person had a very spacious room. Why was it that the 3rd-class cabins had 7 people squeezed into a simple and crude private room? The difference was a little too big. However, Zhuan did not care too much about it. He quickly got used to it. After all, the boundless sailboat had only arrived at the outer court of the Jiashan Academy for 3 days. The entrance examination of the outer court would only begin today. Furthermore, it would last for 7 days. Hence, there was still time. After they sat down in the box, Kanan began to chat with Zhuowen in a rather excited manner. Of course, Kanan was basically talking to himself, while Zhuowen merely sat there and listened to Kanan in silence. Following Jianan's narration, Yun also learned of Jianan and Gatha's origins. It turned out that the two of them came from a small family in the far west of the eastern lands. However, the two of them were exceptionally talented. Although they were only born in a small family, their cultivation speed far exceeded that of their peers. Jianan was only 19 years old. His cultivation had already reached the middle stage of the Xuanzuan realm. Gatha's talent was even more powerful than Jianan's. She was only 18 years old, but her cultivation was the same as Jianan's. It was because of the powerful talent that the two siblings displayed that their family placed all their hopes on them. They hoped that the two siblings could change their family and lead their family to prosperity. In order to pursue a stronger realm and resources, the Jiaxin Academy had also recently started to recruit students. Hence, the two siblings carried the high hopes of their family and came to the desolate ancient city. They boarded the boundless sailboat and headed to the outer court. When Zhuowen asked the siblings why the elders of their family did not follow them, Jianan awkwardly said, "The tickets for the boundless sailboat are too expensive. 2 third-class tickets have already used up most of the family's savings. The family is unable to afford a third person's ticket." Zhuowen nodded. Jianan and Gatha were clearly geniuses who were born in the grassroots. The fate of these geniuses was very similar to Zhuowen's. After all, he had also risen from a small family. He had to overcome obstacles step by step to reach his current level. After a series of conversations, Jianan and Gatha's relationship with Zhuowen became even closer. They were no longer as reserved as before. "Big brother Zhuo, you're only 20 years old, yet your cultivation has already reached the middle stage of the exalted stage. Your talent is truly extraordinary. The chances of you successfully entering the outer court's assessment this time is very high," Jianan said to Zhuowen with a smile. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "That may not be the case. The outer court recruitment this time is open to all regions outside of the 9 netherworld realm. The eastern lands are too vast. There are countless geniuses and experts as common as clouds. I'm afraid that I'm not much in front of those peerless geniuses." Jianan nodded in deep agreement. He used to be content with staying in his family's area. Hence, he had always thought that his talent was already peerless. It was only after he entered the desolate ancient city that his thoughts completely changed. The world was far larger than he had imagined. In this vast world, there would always be more monstrous geniuses, stronger experts, and disciples with stronger backgrounds than him. Hence, the trace of arrogance in his heart had long since been restrained. After chatting for a while, Gatha suddenly tugged at the corner of Jianan's clothes and said softly, "Brother, the air in this room is so stuffy. Why don't we go to the deck to get some fresh air?" Jianan was stunned. He patted Gatha's head and said with a doting smile, "All right. Brother will accompany you." As he spoke, Jianan turned to Zhuowen and said, "Big brother Zhuo, I'm going to the deck to get some fresh air with my sister. Do you want to come with us?" "I'm bored anyway. I'll go with you." Zhuowen nodded and did not refuse. As he spoke, Yun instructed Zhang Tianzuan and the other 4 to stay in the room. Then he followed Jianan and Gatha out of the room and walked up the stairs to the deck. Many people in the aisle saw Zhuowen walking over. Their eyes were filled with dread as they dispersed. Just now, Zhuowen had crippled the right hand of the tall young man with a single move. Many people in the corridor had seen it clearly, so now, everyone was afraid of him like a tiger, and no one dared to provoke him. Zhuowen did not pay attention to these people's reactions. Instead, he followed behind Jianan. Soon, they arrived at the top deck. The deck was very large and could accommodate thousands of people. At this moment, there were many people chatting on the deck. It was quite lively. Above the deck, there were purple halos. Outside the purple halos, there were countless terrifying winds and waves. They were now in the sea of bitterness. The danger in the sea of misery did not only come from the tsunamis of the sea of misery, but also from the unpredictable climate. Moreover, the sky above the sea of misery was covered by huge dark clouds all year round. Lightning as thick as a bucket could be seen everywhere. Powerful hurricanes would often raise the sea water up to tens of thousands of feet high and then violently smash it back down. These dangers were fatal. Even emperors who were not strong enough could die in the harsh environment of the Sea of Misery. Only high emperors like Jian Mu had the right to pass through the harsh environment unscathed. If I can become a high emperor one day, I won't need to ride the world's edge sailboat. I'll be able to cross the Sea of Misery alone. Jianan looked up at the harsh climate above the Sea of Misery and could not help but murmur emotionally. The strong come from the weak. As long as you have the tenacity to pursue the strong, it's only a matter of time before you become strong, Zhuan said nonchalantly. On the other hand, Jianan's eyes flickered with a bright light. The gaze with which he stared at Zhuowen had also changed. Zhuowen's words had enlightened him. There was nothing in the world that you could not do. There were only things that you could not imagine. As long as you were willing to work hard, you would eventually be able to make up for your lack of talent. It's you? I never thought that you would be on the world's edge sailboat as well. Chapter 954. Undying armored soul. What entered his eyes was an enchanting woman with a voluptuous figure. At this moment, the woman was pointing at Jun with a trace of anger on her face. It's her. Jun was startled, and his eyes narrowed. The woman in front of him was the one who wanted to compete with him for the damaged emperor weapon in the desolate ancient city. Jun remembered that this woman was called Chun Hui, and she was from the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty. Moreover, the third prince of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty, Yuansheng, was very good to this woman. At that time, he wanted to snatch the damaged emperor weapon from Zhuowen for her sake, but Jian Mu stopped him and he left resentfully. At this moment, Chun Hui didn't have Yuansheng by her side. She came alone and pointed at Zhuowen's nose without any scruples. Hand over that thing. Otherwise, our Yaoguang Holy Dynasty won't let you go. This is your only way to survive. As soon as Chun Hui's words came out, Jia Nan and Gatha, who were standing not far from Zhuowen, were shocked. Although they came from a small family in the far west of the eastern land, they had heard of the 7 most powerful forces outside of the 9 netherworld realm. The Yaoguang Holy Dynasty was one of the 7 most powerful forces. In their opinion, such a force was an unreachable existence. In front of such a force, their family was like an ant. The siblings stared at Zhuowen's figure, and their eyes became a little strange. Although Zhuowen's cultivation was good, he wasn't a so-called monstrous genius. Moreover, from the way he bought a third-class ticket, they could tell that Zhuowen's background wasn't very strong. However, Zhuowen knew this woman from the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty. The siblings couldn't help but be curious about Zhuowen's identity. Zhuowen sneered, "You want me to hand over that thing? Why should I?" Chun Hui's beautiful eyes curved dangerously, and she said coldly, "You mean you don't want to hand it over? What do you think?" Zhuowen said mockingly. Boom. A terrifying aura gushed out. Chun Hui's beautiful eyes were filled with anger as she said, "I will ask you one more time. Are you going to hand it over or not?" A late-stage supreme being? When Jia Nan and Gatha sensed Chun Hui's aura, their faces turned pale. They hadn't expected her to have such a powerful cultivation base. As expected, the geniuses of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty couldn't be underestimated. The commotion on Chun Hui's side naturally attracted the attention of many nearby martial artists. Numerous gazes shot over. 3 young men walked out from the crowd and stood behind Chun Hui. They stared at Zhuowen coldly. They were also geniuses of the Alcade Holy Dynasty. They had been attracted by the commotion caused by Chun Hui's group. When they discovered the Chun Hui assembly, they naturally came to her side. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "No." "Good. If you don't want to hand it over, I will take it away from you. How dare you be so arrogant in front of the geniuses of the Alcade Holy Dynasty?" Chunwei cried out. Like an ape, her figure flashed and arrived in front of Zhuowen. A red longsword had unknowingly appeared in her jade-like hand. She waved her right hand and flames surged out, causing the surrounding temperature to rise. Clang! Zhuowen stretched out his right hand and a blood-red spear appeared in his hand. He flicked the tip of the spear and it accurately hit the red long sword. The sound of metal colliding rang out, and Chun Hui's figure froze in midair as if time had stopped. Let's attack together and take down this kid. Chun Hui's eyes narrowed. She twisted her waist and changed the momentum of her sword. Blazing flames gushed out and shrouded Juon. The three young men looked at each other and nodded. Then, they turned into three shadows and rushed towards Juon. They formed a triangle and surrounded Juon. You are bullying me with numbers. Despicable! Jianan shouted angrily and rushed towards the three young men. He wanted to stop them from attacking Juon. How dare a kid at the middle stage of the Xuanzuan realm stand in our way? Get lost! One of the three young men cried out coldly. He pointed with his right hand and a powerful yuan power surged out and smashed heavily onto Jianan's body. After which, Jianan was sent flying without any ability to resist and fell to the ground. Brother, are you okay? Gatha came to Jianan's side and asked worriedly. I'm fine. These people from the Alcade Holy Dynasty are despicable. They are besieging Brother Juon. I will not let them succeed. As he spoke, Jianan seemed as if nothing had happened, and he pounced towards the three young men once more. He seemed like a desperate man that didn't hold back at all. You are courting death. The two of you go and help Miss Chun Hui. Leave this kid to me. I will let him have a taste of his own medicine. The eyes of the young man who had attacked earlier were cold. He spoke to the other two young men before he headed towards Jianan. How dare a little ant make a fuss in front of me? You don't know how to write the word death. The young man arrived in front of Jianan in an instant. He flipped his right hand and surging origin energy blasted out. Jianan raised his hands to block the attack. However, the difference in strength was too great. Jianan was sent flying again and spat out a mouthful of blood. You want to be a hero with such little strength? You are simply courting death. The young man's eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at Jianan, who was knocked to the ground. He intended to turn around and rush towards Zhuowen's group. Swoosh! The sound of the air being torn apart suddenly came from the young man. When the young man came to his senses, he saw Jianan's angry face was getting bigger and bigger in his eyes. Bang! The young man's waist was hit and he couldn't help but stagger a few steps back. He looked at Jianan in surprise and said in a low voice, You are just a little ant from the Xuanzuan realm. How can you still have strength after receiving 2 full-strength attacks from me? Bullying the weak? Your Yaoguang Holy Dynasty is one of the 7 great forces in the Eastern Land. How can you be so despicable? Jianan panted and said angrily, Our Yaoguang Holy Dynasty doesn't need an ant like you to teach us a lesson. The young man snorted coldly and attacked Jianan again. This time, he didn't show any mercy. Puchi. This time, the young man landed a heavy blow on Jianan's chest. Jianan's waist arched like a cooked prawn. Blood spurted out like a faucet that wasn't turned on properly. Many people were shocked when they saw this. The young man didn't show any mercy in this attack. He had used his full strength. Many people knew that Jianan was going to die this time. However, to their surprise, Jianan stood up again and pointed at the young man, shouting that the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty was despicable and shameless. Jianan's physique is a little special. At this moment, Chun Hui had already gathered the other 3 to besiege Shun. However, Duan seemed to be at ease. At the same time, he was still in the mood to pay attention to Jianan's situation. Jianan had been beaten up several times, but he seemed to be fine. Zhuan was a little confused. How dare you multitask while fighting with us? I think you are courting death. Chun Hui's beautiful eyes were filled with anger when she saw Zhuowen's behavior. At the same time, there was a trace of shock in her eyes. The 3 of them had joined forces, but they still couldn't take down Zhuan. Moreover, Zhuan seemed to be at ease. I don't want to play anymore. Let's end this battle. Zhuowen said indifferently. Immediately, he waved his blood spear. Suddenly, a terrifying sea of blood swept out from the void behind him. It turned into a blood-red vortex and swept towards Chun Hui and the other 2, trying to engulf them. You don't want to play anymore? Do you think you are strong? You are just a mid-stage sovereign. Do you think you are qualified to say that? Let's kill him together. Zhuo Wen's words clearly provoked Chun Hui, causing her to shriek. She swung the red longsword in her jade-like hand and terrifying flames gushed out, forming a huge sea of fire around her. The other two also used their strongest moves, wanting to take down Zhuan completely. A dense and cold voice rang out. Immediately, the surrounding sea of fire was completely turned into powder and extinguished. Next, Chun Hui and the other two felt a powerful energy surge over. Before this energy, they felt as helpless as they were facing a vast ocean. This energy was too vast and boundless. The three of them spat out fresh blood and flew backwards. After which, they smashed heavily onto the ground. The young man, who was originally entangled with Jianan, had clearly heard the commotion. He turned his head and saw this scene, causing him to be involuntarily stunned. How is this guy so strong? This won't do. I have to find the third prince. The young man's face turned pale, and he actually slipped away at the first moment, disappearing without a trace in an instant. Zhuan glanced at Chun Hui and the other two indifferently. Then he came to Jianan's side. At this moment, Jianan sat on the ground with Gatha's help. He looked at Zhuan excitedly and said, "Brother Zhu, you are so powerful. I really didn't expect that even the people from the Alcade's sacred dynasty couldn't do anything to you. Aren't you injured?" Looking at the lively Jianan in front of him, Zhuan's gaze turned strange. Jianan was only at the middle stage of the Xuanzun realm. The young man from before was at the Supreme Being realm. The latter's full attack wasn't something a cultivator from the Xuanzun realm could withstand. However, Jianan was still lively after being attacked several times. It was as if he wasn't injured at all. If it wasn't for the shocking bloodstains on Jianan's clothes, Zhuan would almost believe that he wasn't injured at all. "I'm fine. My body has been resistant since I was young. I don't know why. Maybe my skin is too thick." Jianan scratched his head and said embarrassedly. Zhuan checked Jianan's meridians. He found that other than some light injuries, there were no signs of serious injuries. Moreover, Zhuan also found that the light injuries on Jianan's body seemed to be healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. What a strong recovery ability. This recovery ability is much stronger than mine with the Nether King's heart. Zhuan thought to himself. Jianan's armor soul is extraordinary. Kid, you have to build a good relationship with this kid in the future. After entering the Divine Academy, this kid will be of great help to you. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. "Xiao Hei, do you know something?" Zhuan asked curiously. Chapter 955. Yuanxing, Undying Armor Soul? Zhuan was shocked. Zhuan had heard about the Undying Armor Soul before. It was said that this armor soul was formless and intangible. Even if one's cultivation had advanced to the fourth venerable realm, the armor soul would not materialize. However, the power of this armor soul was one of the best among all armor souls. As long as the cultivator did not die, the undying armor soul would release a strong recovery power, allowing the cultivator's injuries to heal in a short time. It could be said that the cultivator with the undying armor soul was like a cockroach that could not be killed. No matter how strong the attack was, as long as the attack did not annihilate the cultivator would not die. It was said that as the cultivator's cultivation level increased, the power of the undying armor soul would also become more and more abnormal. For example, a broken arm could be regrown. Even if the cultivator's physical body and nascent soul were destroyed, as long as there was a drop of blood, the cultivator could still be revived with this drop of blood. However, the revival time would be very long. Therefore, in the history of the heavenly armor continent, the cultivators with the undying armor soul would usually divide their blood essence into many parts and hide them in extremely secret places. If they were unlucky and died, they would be completely immortal with the help of the undying armor soul. In a sense, the undying armor soul was more precious and rare than a 9th-grade dragon soul. Moreover, it was also a kind of abnormal armor soul that many experts were afraid of. Yuan did not expect Jianan, who came from the far west, to have the undying armor soul. It was no wonder that he could cultivate to the middle stage of the Xuanzun realm at such a young age despite his humble background. This boy's talent could not be underestimated. Then, Zhuowen's gaze fell on Gatha, who was beside Jianan. Gatha's talent seemed to be stronger than Jianan's. However, this girl did not have any combat experience. When Jianan was fighting just now, she only stood aside in a panic. Zhuowen could faintly feel that these two siblings were extraordinary. Perhaps they would achieve great things in the future. This was especially true for Kanan. If he did not fall midway, he would definitely be a monstrous existence when he grew up. You've got guts. You actually dared to touch the people of our Yaoguang holy dynasty. Today I'll kill you. A thunderous voice rang out, and then two figures suddenly rushed over from the other side of the deck. One of them was the young man who had fled just now, and the other was no stranger to Jun. It was actually the third prince of the Yaoguang holy dynasty, Yuansheng. It's actually the third prince of the Yaoguang holy dynasty, Yuansheng. That brat is actually from the Yaoguang holy dynasty. He's simply courting death. An uproar broke out all around. Yuansheng's roar naturally attracted everyone's attention. Only then did everyone realize that Chun Hui and the other two were actually from the Alcade sacred dynasty. Many people had heard of the Yaoguang holy dynasty, so they looked at Zhuowen and the other two with pity in their eyes. Your Highness, this little bastard actually dared to bully me. You have to uphold justice for me. Moreover, just now, he even said that our Yaoguang holy dynasty is nothing. He doesn't put us in his eyes at all. It's really hateful. As soon as Yuansheng arrived, Chun Hui quickly grabbed Yuansheng's right arm and acted coquettishly. Her words were directed at Zhuowen. Not long after Yuansheng's arrival, three more figures rushed over. These three figures were middle-aged men who were over 50 years old. The aura on their bodies was extremely vast. They were all heavenly venerables. At this moment, the three of them knelt on one knee on the ground and said respectfully, Your Highness, this person looks down on everyone and despises the dignity of the Yaoguang holy dynasty. Let us teach him a good lesson. Yuansheng waved his hand and raised his chin. He looked down at Zhuowen and said arrogantly, He's just an ant at the middle stage of the venerable realm. There's no need for the three of you to take action. After saying that, Yuansheng slowly walked toward Zhuowen and said indifferently, Killing is not allowed in the Sky-End sailboat, so you're lucky to have met this prince here. I won't kill you. I'll only cut off one of your arms. In the future, you'll remember that there are some people you can't afford to provoke. It's obviously that bitch behind you who provoked Brother Zhuo first. Brother Zhuo was just defending himself. How can you twist the truth and cut off Brother Zhuo's arm? Isn't your Yaoguang holy dynasty a little too despicable? Jianan's face turned red and he couldn't help but shout angrily. Where did this little bastard come from? How dare you boast shamelessly in front of this prince? I think you're courting death. Yuansheng's eyes turned cold and he pressed his right hand against the void. Terrifying origin energy condensed into a huge palm and pressed down on Jianan. At this moment, Jianan's injuries had yet to heal. Moreover, Yuansheng's cultivation was at the early golden venerable realm, which was 2 realms higher than him. The difference in their strength was too great. Jianan couldn't resist this attack at all. Boom! A terrifying fire of the sun gushed out from Zhuowen's body and turned into a huge fire python. It instantly entangled the origin energy palm in the sky. With a twist, the origin energy palm was completely annihilated. You're indeed the third prince of the Yaoguang holy dynasty. You're even able to bully the weak without losing your face. Zhuowen said indifferently. However, Yuansheng's face darkened and he snorted coldly, You have a sharp tongue. After I've dealt with you, the 3 of you will be punished accordingly. Having said that, Yuansheng stomped his foot and the aura of the early golden venerable realm gushed out. It was as though a vast origin energy ocean had formed around his body. At the same time, Yuansheng flicked his right hand and a golden scepter appeared in his palm. There was a crystal-clear gem embedded at the top of the scepter. The scepter's aura was surging and there was a royal aura. It was obvious that the scepter was a royal spiritual treasure and its aura was vast and mighty. Yuansheng was enveloped in golden light and he looked like an emperor who was revered by tens of thousands of people. Many people felt ashamed of their inferiority. In the golden light, Yuansheng looked down at Zhuowen and said in a majestic voice, Because of my benevolence, I've only chosen to cut off one of your arms. Of course, if you kneel down and cut off one of your arms, I'm willing to forgive your sins. Many people looked at Yuanxing, who was enveloped in golden light, and there was a hint of surprise in their eyes. Obviously, the scepter in Yuanxing's hand was not an ordinary royal spiritual treasure. The power it exuded was vast and mighty. In addition to Yuanxing's golden venerable realm cultivation, ordinary golden venerables might not be a match for Yuanxing. Is it so great to have a royal spiritual treasure? A mocking smile appeared on Zhuo Wen's face. He stomped his foot, and an endless amount of fire of the sun shot out. Then, a blazing sun slowly rose behind him. If one looked carefully, it was not a blazing sun but a furnace enveloped in sun fire. The surface of the furnace was engraved with sun runes, and its power was not inferior to the scepter in Yuanxing's hand. An ant like you actually has a royal spiritual treasure? Yuanxing's eyes narrowed and he was surprised. However, he still said with contempt, "But an ant will always be an ant. You're only at the intermediate stage of the sovereign realm. Do you think you can resist me with a royal spiritual treasure? Soon, I'll let you know that your reliance is nothing but an illusion because it's futile in front of powerful strength." Jun narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "Are you done? I still haven't seen you display any powerful strength, but I can see that your eloquence is unparalleled." Yuanxing's face stiffened and he snorted coldly, "You'll regret what you just said. I've decided to break your arms and let you repent." As he spoke, he formed a seal with his right hand and shouted, "Golden dragon curse, come out and destroy." Suddenly, a dragon's roar resounded. Then, the golden light around Yuanxing turned into a huge golden dragon. It swooped down and swept toward Zhuan, wanting to tear Zhuan into pieces. 3 suns. Zhuan was not to be outdone. Endless flames of the great sun gushed out and condensed into 3 dazzling blazing suns above his head. The 3 blazing suns rose and then fell, blasting toward the golden dragon. Rumble! The golden dragon and the suns collided, and then a violent explosion resounded. The blazing sun's light and the golden dragon's light intersected, causing many cultivators on the deck to narrow their eyes. At the moment when the golden dragon and the suns were in a deadlock, a figure swept out, passed through the explosion, and rushed towards Yuanxing. It was Yun with the blood spear in his hand. "You're courting death." Yuanxing's eyes turned cold. He waved the scepter in his hand and a blazing golden light gushed out, turning into a golden rain that enveloped Yun. Azura blood spear. In midair, Zhuowen twisted his waist, and his entire body started to spin like a spiral. The space around him split open, and a sea of blood gushed out, transforming into a blood-colored whirlpool that wrapped around Zhuowen's body. Bang, bang, bang. The golden rain fell and bombarded the blood vortex around Zhuan, causing a slight pitter-patter sound. Zhuan passed through the golden rain without any obstruction and rushed towards Yuanxing. Yuanxing's eyes narrowed, revealing a trace of seriousness. He formed a seal with his right hand again, and the golden light changed again, turning into a monstrous golden hurricane that swept towards Zhuan. Zhuowen's lips curled. 3 pairs of lightning wings suddenly sprouted from his back. Then, the lightning wings spread out and his speed soared to the extreme. He forcibly bypassed the golden hurricane, avoiding the golden hurricane's trajectory in a strange arc, and arrived in front of Yuanxing in an instant. At this moment, Yuanxing's face finally changed. He did not expect Zhuowen to have so many tricks up his sleeve. The blood spear shuttled through the void and swept over in an instant. The tip of the spear emitted a demonic blood-red color. Yuanxing's scepter landed on the ground, and a golden light gushed out from it, turning into a thick golden barrier in front of him. Ding! The blood spear collided with the golden barrier, and the sound of metal clashing resounded. Then, it stopped in front of the golden barrier as if time had stopped. "It seems that this prince has underestimated you. However, you're overestimating yourself if you want to attack this prince with such tricks." Looking at Zhuan, who was blocked outside the golden barrier, Yuanxing's lips were filled with a mocking smile. "Do you really think that's all I have?" Chapter 956. Emperor's aura cracks spread out on the surface of the golden barrier. In the end, it completely shattered into countless golden lights. Subsequently, a blood spear shot out from the countless golden lights like a thread piercing through flowers. Pucci. A stream of blood violently spurted out. Subsequently, an arm holding a golden scepter soared into the sky while dripping with blood. After tumbling a few times in the air, it landed on the ground. Rumble. The sound of the scepter hitting the ground resounded, completely attracting the attention of countless people in the surrounding area. When everyone's gaze landed on the golden scepter that was still rolling on the ground, as well as the arm that was holding it, the surrounding atmosphere suddenly became deathly silent. Ah! A miserable howl instantly resounded. Yuanxing, who was floating in the air, finally felt the pain in his right arm. He stretched out his left hand and touched his left arm. Only then did he realize that his right arm had been chopped off. Yuanxing held his right arm and continuously retreated. Both of his eyes were scarlet red. In front of everyone's eyes, his right arm had been chopped off. This was a great humiliation. Swoosh. As Yuanxing was retreating, a piercing sound swept over. Subsequently, an expressionless Zhuan arrived in front of Yuanxing. The force of his right palm shot out towards Yuanxing. Bastard, you actually dared to chop off my arm. Yuanxing furiously roared. Ignoring the injury on his right arm, his left palm shot out in an attempt to block Zhuan's attack. Because of my benevolence, I only cut off one of your arms. Otherwise, that spear earlier would not have pierced your right arm. Instead, it would have pierced your heart, Zhuan coldly mocked. Hearing these words, Yuanxing almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Wasn't this the boast he had made earlier? Now that Zhuan had purposely mentioned it, it was simply a ruthless slap to his face. Boom! The two palms collided again. Unfortunately, Yuanxing had lost an arm and his qi and blood were not strong enough. It was impossible for him to block Zhuan's palm. Spitting out another mouthful of blood, Yuanxing fell from the sky and landed heavily on the ground. The strong impact almost made Yuanxing faint. Just as Yuanxing was about to stand up, Zhuan was already standing in front of him. Zhuan ruthlessly stomped on his chest, causing the former to groan and fall to the ground again. Everyone's eyes narrowed as they watched this scene. As the third prince of the Alcade sacred dynasty, Yuanxing was extremely talented and his cultivation level was at the initial stage of the Golden Venerate realm. However, he was now being trampled on. Moreover, this person's age and cultivation were lower than Yuanxing's. Originally, this battle should have been without suspense. However, the result now was beyond everyone's expectations. Yuanxing was defeated and he lost miserably. I say, third prince of the Yaoguang holy dynasty. You just said that I am an ant that is not worth mentioning. Now, you are being trampled on by the ant that you said. How do you feel? Zhuan asked calmly. As soon as these words came out, a mocking look appeared in the eyes of many people. Yuanxing was incomparably overbearing and did not put Zhuan in his eyes at all. But now, Zhuan, who he did not put in his eyes, was stepping on his chest in a victorious manner. Such a turn of events made him feel ashamed. Chun Hui, who had a sneer on her face, froze at this moment. It was replaced by a look of disbelief. The invincible third prince in her heart was being trampled on the ground in such a humiliating manner. She could not believe it at all. Even Jianan and Gatha were stunned. Originally, they did not think that Zhuan would be a match for Yuanxing. But now, they had to believe that Zhuan was indeed very strong. After regaining their senses, the two of them stared at Zhuan's figure. Light flickered in their eyes, revealing a touch of excitement. Yuanxing's eyes were full of humiliation. He roared, "Let go of this prince immediately, or I will make you die miserably." You want me to die miserably? You're like a stray dog now. How can you make me die miserably? Zhuan said indifferently. Boom, boom, boom. 3 terrifying auras suddenly gushed out. Immediately, the 3 heavenly masters of the Yaoguang holy dynasty, who were not far away, attacked at the same time, rushing toward Zhuan. Little bastard, how dare you do such a thing to the third prince? You are courting death. In an instant, the 3 heavenly masters formed a triangle and surrounded Zhuan. their terrifying auras firmly locked onto Zhu. Despicable! Your Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's third prince is not a match for Brother Zhua. You three elders actually joined hands to deal with Brother Zhua. Don't you have any sense of shame? Jianan was extremely angry. He roared and wanted to rush toward Zhuan. However, he was stopped by Zhuan. Jianan, don't be impulsive. I am fine. Jianan stopped and said worriedly, but the three of them are heavenly masters. Jianan did not finish his words, but Zhuan knew what he wanted to say. Zhuan was only at the sovereign realm, while the three middle-aged men were heavenly masters. Although Zhuan had shown great strength in defeating Yuanxing, the gap between their realms was too big. Zhuan could not be a match for the three of them. After all, the difference between the Venerate realm and the Heavenly Venerate realm was 2 whole realms. The difference in strength was bound to be huge. Although Zhuowen had defeated a Yuan sage cleanly, that Yuan sage was merely a golden Venerate powerhouse. Little bastard, quickly release the third prince, or else your end will be extremely miserable. The 3 Empyrean powerhouses surrounded Zhuo Wen, their eyes full of threat. Zhuan slowly got up and raised his right hand, lifting Yuanxing in the palm of his hand as if he was lifting a chick. At the same time, a seal appeared on his right hand. It was a communication seal that could be used to contact Xiang Tianzuan and the other 4. The 3 heavenly masters of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty changed their faces and their eyes were filled with coldness. This lad was too audacious. He actually dared to lift the prince of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty in such a humiliating manner. This lad deserved to die. What? You want to fight? You should know that your third prince is still in my hands. If the 3 of you dare to fight, this lad will definitely die, Zhuan said indifferently. The faces of the 3 heavenly venerates stiffened. They stopped in midair and stared at Zhuowen with flickering eyes. They were really afraid that Zhuowen would kill Yuanxing in a suicidal manner. The surrounding people were in an uproar as they stared at Zhun in surprise. At the same time, they were trying to guess the origin of Zhun. He didn't give the Yaoguang sacred dynasty any face. Wasn't he afraid of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty's revenge? Yuanxing, you are really in a sorry state. How could you be reduced to such a sorry state by a mere venerate? I wonder if your father will punish you if he sees you humiliating him here? A dark and cold voice was transmitted over. Immediately, 3 people walked out from the crowd at the side. The person at the front was wearing a long blue robe. There was a huge blue whale picture on his long robe. It looked extremely lifelike and lifelike. Blue smoke? You bastard, this lad isn't ordinary. If you fight him, you won't be any better than me. Yuanxing's gaze was extremely cold. He didn't struggle as he was being held by Zhuan. Instead, he looked very calm. Blue smoke from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. This blue smoke is a noble descendant of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. His talent is extremely high, and he's much stronger than most of the princes of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. He's famous in the entire Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. He's actually on the Heaven's Edge sailboat. The Heaven's Edge sailboat's first stop is the Outer Court of Fine Divinity Institute. I'm afraid many of the top geniuses of the Eastern lands will rush there to participate in the exam. This blue smoke and Yuanxing should be here for that. The mysterious youth who defeated Yuanxing should be here as well. His background shouldn't be low. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to look down on the Brilliance Holy Dynasty. After Yuanxing mentioned Blue Smoke's name, many people in the surroundings whispered, and they instantly revealed Blue Smoke's background. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. Another genius from the Holy Dynasty had appeared. Moreover, this Blue Smoke's aura was much stronger than Yuanxing's. He had probably reached the peak of the Golden Venerable Realm. No wonder this Blue Smoke looked down on Yuanxing. Yuanxing's gaze was dark as he stared at Zhuan. He said coldly, "Put me down, then kneel and kowtow to me 3 times and 9 times. Become my slave and I'll spare your dog life." Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. This Yuanxing was now in his hands, yet he still dared to talk nonsense. Was there something wrong with his head? Don't you know your current situation? Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Yuanxing smiled strangely and said, "Your strength is not bad. You're obviously only at the mid-stage of the Venerable Realm, but your combat strength is comparable to a golden venerable. Moreover, you're much stronger than an ordinary golden venerable. You're a genius. Originally, I wanted to keep you by my side and make you my most loyal slave, but now, you've completely lost that opportunity. So, you're finished. As soon as Yuanxing said that, a sense of foreboding rose in Zhuowen's heart. Then, an extremely powerful force surged out of Yuanxing's body. This force contained the majestic emperor's qi. An illusory star rushed out of Yuanxing's body and swept towards Yun. The power of an emperor? Zhuowen's face changed drastically. He quickly let go of Yuanxing's right hand and stepped back. Unfortunately, this illusory star was like a maggot that stuck to Zhuowen's bones. It wouldn't stop until it completely annihilated Zhuowen. Azura blood spear. Zhuowen roared furiously. Then, an endless sea of blood enveloped him and blocked in front of him, turning into a blood-red barrier. Unfortunately, the blood-red barrier was useless in front of the illusory star. It collapsed and shattered into countless blood-red powder. Zhuowen's eyes were extremely cold. He didn't expect that Yuanxing actually had the power of an emperor hidden in his body. Although this power of an emperor was very little, it wasn't something that an ordinary venerable could resist. Yuanxing fell to the side and his face was slightly pale. He took out a jade bottle from his spiritual ring, removed the stopper, and poured it on the wound on his severed right arm. A subtle sound rang out. Shortly after, Yuanxing let out a low groan. Then his severed right arm grew back. Picking up the golden scepter, Yuanxing waved his right hand. The illusory star didn't chase after Zhuowen, but returned to Yuanxing's body. This illusory star was a strand of power that his emperor father had left in his body. Every time he used it, it would decrease a little. He wouldn't waste it on Zhuowen. After all, the outer courtyard exam of Jiaxin Academy was filled with danger. This thing had to be saved for that time. Chapter 957. Blue Smoke. Yuanxing was in a bad mood. That wisp of emperor force was his final trump card. Once it was unleashed, even a heavenly master would be put in a difficult position. He had reserved this trump card for the outer court assessment. Now that he had used it in advance, it had been seen by Blue Smoke and many others. When the time came for the outer court assessment, many people who had seen his trump card would be on guard. Then he would lose the element of surprise. All of this was caused by Zhuowen. Therefore, Yuanxing now had the intention to kill Zhuowen. The three heavenly masters nodded respectfully and looked at Zhuowen with a grim smile. Because Yuanxing was in Zhuowen's hands, the three heavenly masters were afraid to make a move. That kind of feeling was quite sullen. Now that Yuanxing was out of danger, they could attack without any scruples. This kid in front of them dared to threaten three dignified heavenly masters. He was simply courting death. Sush, sush. The three heavenly masters turned into three phantoms and rushed toward Zhuowen from three blind spots, blocking all of Zhuowen's escape routes. Brother Zhuo, be careful. Jia Nan and Gatha exclaimed at the same time. Their eyes were filled with resentment. The people of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty were too despicable. Not only did they fight with people of the same generation, but now that Yuanxing was defeated, they actually sent three heavenly masters to deal with him. The surrounding onlookers also revealed mocking expressions. Zhuowen's performance was indeed eye-catching, but there was no suspense at all for a mere middle-stage sovereign to face the joint forces of three heavenly sovereigns. What an unlucky kid. Blue Smoke crossed his arms and looked like he was watching a good show. He naturally didn't think that Zhuowen could withstand the joint attack of three heavenly masters. Are you regretting your rude behavior just now? If you had obediently listened to His Majesty's arrangement and become his servant, you might still have a chance to live. But now you're finished. In an instant, the three heavenly masters were already close to him. One of the heavenly masters sneered, revealing a row of white teeth. It looked extremely frightening. However, Zhuowen stood where he was calmly. There was no fear on his face. The terrifying aura emitted by the three heavenly venerates created a gust of wind that blew at Zhuowen's messy hair. Finished? Maybe not. An indifferent voice sounded. Then, three figures suddenly shot out from behind Zhuowen. They moved as fast as lightning and protected Zhuowen. The three heavenly masters who was attacking Zhuowen felt their palms were blocked by a powerful force. They heavenly masters and heavenly masters. Of the three heavenly masters. Heavenly masters, heavenly masters. What's going on? It only took a blink of an eye for the three heavenly masters to retreat. Many people didn't even see what had happened. The three heavenly masters of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty were forced to retreat. When everyone's eyes focused on Zhuan again, they saw 5 figures with strong auras standing in front of Zhuan. They were Ziyang Tianzuan and the other 4 heavenly masters. When Zhuan mentioned Yuanxing, he had already informed Ziyang Tianzuan and the others to come to the deck through the mark on his hand. When Ziyang Tianzuan and the others arrived, the 3 heavenly masters had joined forces to besiege Zhuan. The 3 heavenly masters were White Brow Holy Master, Sunset Moon Holy Master, and Yellow Jade Holy Master. Greetings, Master. The 5 heavenly masters stood in front of Zhuan. They turned around and bowed respectfully to Zhuan. Everyone who saw this was shocked. It was normal for a genius to have the protection of an Empyrean powerhouse. But the relationship between a genius and an Empyrean powerhouse was unequal. Very few Empyreans would be willing to become the servant of a weaker martial artist. That was because the status of a servant was completely unequal. If the master wanted the servant to die, the servant had to die. This was a huge restriction on the status of a servant. Although the 3 heavenly masters of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty were quite respectful to Yuanxing, it was also because of Yuanxing's identity and background. They were still equal in status. But now, these 5 celestial lords who had appeared out of nowhere were actually respectfully addressing Zhuowen as their master without any complaints. This had really caused everyone's jaws to drop. Could it be that this young man's background was really extraordinary? He actually had 5 celestial lords as his servants. Blue Smoke, who was standing in front of the crowd, narrowed his eyes. He was quite surprised that Yuan actually had 5 heavenly master servants. A wisp of light flashed across his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Yuanxing was also stunned. Obviously, he had not expected such a situation to happen. The young man, who was just an ant in his eyes, actually had 5 heavenly master servants. Jia Nan and Gatha were also stunned. When they first met Zhuan, they had noticed that Ziyang Tianzuan and the other 4 were extraordinary. However, they did not expect that all 5 of them were heavenly masters. Moreover, they were also important servants of Zhu. What is Brother Zhuo's identity? He has 5 heavenly master servants. This kind of treatment is not much worse than Yuanxing's. Jia Nan and Gatha looked at each other and revealed a look of shock. They did not expect that Zhuowen actually had such a powerful force behind him. He even had the protection of 5 heavenly masters. Yuanxing, it seems that you have kicked an iron plate. However, I think that our 3rd prince of the Yaoguang holy dynasty had one of his arms chopped off in front of everyone. I don't think our 3rd prince will be able to swallow such humiliation, right? If we don't get back at him, our Yaoguang holy dynasty will become a joke. Blue Smoke spoke again. However, this time, his words vaguely poked Yuanxing's sore spot, causing Yuanxing's face to turn extremely ugly. Zhuowen's eyes turned cold. Blue Smoke's purpose was obviously to provoke a fight between him and Yuanxing. Blue Smoke, have you said enough? If you say another word, don't blame me for attacking you, Yuanxing said coldly. Blue Smoke's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he said with a smile, Yuanxing, why do you have to vent your anger on me? Isn't it that brat who made you like this? What's the use of getting angry at me? Or are you, Yuanxing, afraid and want to retreat? Shut your dog mouth. Do I need you to tell me what to do? Yuanxing said coldly to Blue Smoke. Then he glared fiercely at Zhuowen and said, You're just a coward who relies on the strength of 5 celestial masters. If my 2 uncles didn't take my eldest brother and second brother to Jiaxing first, the 5 celestial masters would just be a joke. You said that I'm a coward who only knows how to hide behind the celestial masters. Then how good are you? You can't defeat me, but you sent 3 celestial masters to encircle me. Do you think that's a glorious thing? Zhuowen sneered coldly. However, his heart was filled with vigilance. The foundation of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty was very deep. From the words of the Yuan sage just now, it could be inferred that the Yuan sage had two elder brothers who were much stronger than him. Moreover, the two uncles he mentioned, Zhuowen suspected that they were two emperor realm experts. After all, the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's foundation was much stronger than the Qing Xian Empire and Yan Xian Empire. It was impossible for there to be only one emperor realm expert. Yuanxing's eyes were cold and he said, "Humph! Don't let me see you again during the outer courtyard assessment, or I'll make you die a horrible death." After saying that, Yuanxing left the deck with the three celestial masters and returned to the special cabin. Obviously, he was at a disadvantage in the confrontation with Yuan, and he couldn't regain his face. Naturally, he didn't want to stay on the deck any longer. The foundation of these holy dynasties is really extraordinary. The medicine that Yuanxing used to regrow his severed arm is probably not ordinary. Your Qing Xian Empire has never seen such a miraculous thing. Xiao Hei's voice resounded in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen rolled his eyes at her, but he didn't say anything. Yuanxing really had a lot of trump cards, especially that monarch qi. It was especially terrifying. Zhuowen discovered that Yuanxing's monarch qi was much stronger than Emperor Qing's. It probably wasn't something that a low-level emperor realm expert could possess. It was very likely that it was the monarch qi of a mid-level emperor realm expert. However, Yuanxing obviously cherished that strand of monarch qi. After using it to escape from Zhuowen's hand, he immediately kept it. Obviously, the monarch qi should be used up, and Yuanxing didn't want to waste it. Originally, Yuanxing thought that the three celestial masters would be enough to kill Zhuowen. Unfortunately, he was wrong. Zhuowen still had 5 celestial masters behind him. Many cultivators on the deck pointed at Tun, their eyes filled with fear. A person who could have 5 celestial masters as his servants must have a powerful background. Therefore, they were naturally foolish enough to provoke Zhuowen. Dang dang dang. The crisp sound of footsteps could be heard, startling Zhuowen out of his thoughts. Lifting his head slightly, Zhuowen saw a smiling young face. Zhuowen wasn't unfamiliar with this face. It was actually Blue Smoke, who had provoked Yuanxing with his words just now. Blue Smoke's face was filled with a warm smile. He walked naturally to Zhuowen, as if they were old friends. Just now, he had been inciting Yuanxing to kill Zhuowen. Hypocrite! Zhuowen secretly defined Blue Smoke in his heart. This Blue Smoke was definitely a shrewd person, so Zhuowen was still very wary of him. "What's the matter?" Zhuowen asked coldly. Blue Smoke's footsteps stiffened, but he soon calmly stood in front of Zhuowen, cupped his fists, and said with a smile, "I really didn't expect this brother's strength to be so great. You even have 5 celestial master servants following behind you. I'm afraid this brother's background isn't simple, right? This one is Blue Smoke, the son of a marquis of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. May I know this brother's name and which holy dynasty you come from? After all, you don't look familiar to me," Blue Smoke said with a smile. Zhuowen's eyes were indifferent as he said, "I'm just a wandering cloud and a wild crane. This one's background can't compare to Sir Blue Smoke's. Of course, my strength is also far inferior, so there's no need to mention me." After saying that, Yuan didn't wait for Blue Smoke to speak and walked past him. He had no intention of continuing the conversation with Blue Smoke. Chapter 958. Discussion. The deck of the World's Edge sailboat was very large. Although the battle between Zhuowen and Yuanxing had caused quite a stir, only the cultivators on the deck knew about it. Moreover, most of the people on the World's Edge sailboat this time were geniuses who were participating in the outer court assessment of Fine God Academy. Geniuses were usually proud and arrogant, and it was common for them to prove their strength through battles. Therefore, the commotion caused by the battle between Zhuowen and Yuanxing gradually died down after everyone discussed it for a while. "Young master, this person is so rude. He dares to look down on you just because he has 5 heavenly venerables? Doesn't he know that 5 heavenly venerables are nothing in front of our Blue Whale Holy Dynasty?" The 2 heavenly venerables behind Blue Smoke revealed a trace of anger when they saw Zhuowen's rude behavior. Blue Smoke shook his head and said, "It doesn't matter. I'm just curious about this kid's background. Not to mention the 5 heavenly venerables behind him, just the fact that he can make an early golden venerate Yuanxing look so miserable. This kid is definitely not simple. This kid's battle strength is indeed extraordinary, but compared to young master, he's still lacking. After all, if you were to fight with Yuanxing, you would only need a few moves to defeat Yuanxing. The 2 heavenly venerables flattered. The corners of Blue Smoke's mouth rose slightly, and he said indifferently, "Of course. My opponents are merely the top geniuses of the 7 major forces. Although this kid is not bad, he's still not qualified to be my opponent." The 2 heavenly venerables nodded. Blue Smoke's talent in the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty was obvious to all. With his lowly status as the son of a noble, he faced difficulties step by step, suppressing many princes and chasing after the Holy Dynasty's crown prince. What kind of glory was that? Let's go. Whether he's a dragon or a snake, we can only prove it in the outer court assessment. Blue Smoke silently glanced at Zhuowen's back, then left the deck with the 2 heavenly venerables. At this moment, Yuan had already left the deck with Xiang Tianzuan and arrived at the northern part of the deck. There were fewer people there, and it was quieter. The 2 little fellows, Jia Nan and Jia Sha, followed behind Zhuowen. Their eyes were filled with admiration. Zhuowen's performance just now was too shocking. The Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's 3rd prince, Yuanxing, had come aggressively to denounce and provoke Zhuowen. But not only did he fail, but Zhuowen's heavenly venerables he had even lost. The 3 great heavenly venerates of the Alcade Sacred Dynasty wanted to bully the weak but had never expected that Zhuowen would have 5 great heavenly venerates behind him. The Yuan sage was once again defeated. "Brother Zhuo, I didn't expect you to be so strong. You have 5 heavenly venerables protecting you. The force behind you must be very powerful, right?" Kanan asked excitedly. A wisp of a bitter smile appeared on Zhuo Wenlu's face as he gazed at Jia Nan's excited and clear eyes. Jia Nan is really naive. He actually casually asked such private questions. However, Yuan also knew that this was Kanan's nature, so he didn't mind too much. Instead, he smiled and said, "You can understand it that way. But this time, the outer court recruitment of Excellent God Academy doesn't depend on how strong the force behind you is, but on your own strength and potential." It was too troublesome to explain the origins of Xiang Tianzuan and the other heavenly venerables, so Zhuan didn't plan to go into detail. He just wanted Kanan and Gatha to think that the 5 heavenly venerables were sent by the force behind him to protect him. "I must enter Excellent God Academy this time. Once I succeed, I will return to the far west with my sister to revive our family." Kanan nodded and said proudly, "Revive our family?" Zhuan nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. He also wanted to revive his family. Fortunately, he had arranged for the Zhuo family members to stay in the Azure Dragon Hall. The Azure Dragon Hall was surrounded by the Azure Dragon's source energy. The source energy was extremely beneficial to a warrior's cultivation. In addition, the Zhuo family was a descendant of the Ryuka from 10,000 years ago. Perhaps they could use the Azure Dragon's source energy to awaken their own dragon soul. Zhuan was very clear about the strength of a dragon soul. Even if it was a low-level dragon soul, the power it could display was much stronger than an ordinary armor soul. If many members of the Zhuo family awakened their dragon soul, their strength would increase greatly. After staying on the deck for a while, Kanan and Gatha wanted to go back to rest, so Zhuan had Xiang Tianzuan and the other heavenly venerables accompany them back to the 3rd-class cabin. He remained on the deck, silently looking at the terrible weather outside. "Brother Zhuo, I didn't expect you to come to the deck for a breath of fresh air. What a coincidence." A familiar voice sounded. Zhuan turned his head and saw Mo Lington walking towards him with a smile on his face. "What a coincidence." Zhuan nodded and said with a faint smile. Mo Lingtian came to Zhuowen's side and followed Zhuowen's gaze. He also noticed the spectacular weather above the bitter sea and said, "Just now, Lingtian heard that a young man fought with Yuanxing on the deck and actually cut off one of Yuanxing's arms." Yuanxing of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty was flustered and exasperated. He actually sent 3 heavenly venerables to deal with that young man. However, that young man actually had 5 heavenly venerables as his servants, causing Yuansheng to return in defeat. Mo Lingtian looked at Zhuan with a smile. In fact, when he heard the rumor, he suspected that the young man who fought with Yuansheng should be Zhuan. After all, Yuan also had 5 heavenly venerables as his guards. Zhuan nodded and said indifferently, "It was Yuansheng and the others who provoked me first. They deserved to be humiliated." Mo Lingtian's heart trembled. The young man in the rumor was indeed Zhuan. Yuansheng was an early-stage golden venerable genius, and a genius of the Yaoguang holy dynasty. His combat strength was definitely more terrifying than ordinary golden venerables. However, Yuan still managed to cut off one of his arms. Obviously, Yuan, whose cultivation was only at the mid-stage of the venerable realm, was even more terrifying. Mo Lingtian could do the same as a supreme venerate. However, Mo Lingtian knew that if he did not pay a certain price, it would be impossible for him to win against an early-stage golden venerate martialist. If Mo Lingtian were to fight with Yuansheng, he knew that he wouldn't be a match for Yuansheng. After all, they were both geniuses, and their combat strength couldn't be measured by cultivation alone. Mo Lingtian's cultivation was only at the peak of the venerable realm, which was weaker than Yuansheng. However, Yuan was able to cut off one of Yuansheng's arms. Even Mo Lingtian was shocked. Brother Zhua is indeed extraordinary. Defeating a golden venerable while at the venerable realm is something only the top geniuses of the holy dynasty can do. However, Brother Zhua isn't any worse than those top geniuses. Mo Lingtian sighed. Zhuan shook his head and said, "Actually, it's just a fluke." Mo Lingtian took a deep look at Zhuan. He knew that Zhuan didn't want to talk about this topic, so he didn't mention it again. "Brother Mo, you are a prince of the Yanxian dynasty. Do you know the details of the outer courtyard examination of the Jiaxin Academy?" Zhuan suddenly asked. Mo Lingtian was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, "Jiaxin Academy doesn't recruit students at a fixed time. As for the specific examination, it's different every time. I remember that the last time they recruited students was more than 10 years ago. Although the assessment is different every year, the format has never changed. There are 3 stages to the outer courtyard's assessment. The first stage is the basic stage. This basic stage has never changed. It tests bone age, cultivation base, and aptitude." Hearing that, Zhuan was immediately interested and asked, "It actually tests bone age, cultivation, and aptitude. Are there any special requirements for these 3 aspects?" Of course there are. The minimum requirement to enter the outer courtyard is that you must be under 25 years old and have a cultivation of the Xuanzuan realm. In the past, there was no lack of cultivators who came to take advantage of the situation. Although these cultivators were strong, they would still be rejected by the Jiaxin Academy. Mo Lingtian nodded and said. Zhuan's eyes narrowed. It seemed that the selection process of the Jiaxin Academy was quite principled. However, it was also true. A cultivator's potential would explode at the age of 25. If they were nurtured well during this period, their future would be limitless. However, after the age of 25, their potential had already been set. Even if they had a high cultivation, their future achievements wouldn't be too high. The Jiaxin Academy obviously didn't want to waste time on such old cultivators. This was also why most of the cultivators who came to the Jiaxin Academy to participate in the examination were young cultivators. Moreover, all of them were geniuses. After all, to be able to reach the cultivation of the Xuanzuan realm before the age of 25, there weren't many geniuses in the Xian dynasty who were able to do so. Those who were able to do so were basically heaven-sent geniuses. And these heaven-sent geniuses in the Xian dynasty had become the minimum requirement for the Jiaxin Academy's enrollment. It could be seen how harsh the Jiaxin Academy's enrollment requirements were. As for aptitude, it's actually a cultivator's potential. The higher the aptitude, the greater the potential. This thing is originally an illusory thing and is simply hard to define. However, for a cultivator to reach the cultivation of the Xuanzuan realm before the age of 25, their aptitude wouldn't be bad. Therefore, this test is rather useless in the basic mode. Mo Lingtian continued. Zhuowen nodded and continued to ask, Brother Mo, what are the 2 levels after the basic mode? Mo Lingtian's mouth was full of bitterness as he said, the last 2 levels of the test are the outer court secret. Moreover, every time there's an enrollment, it will change. As for what kind of test it is, it's impossible for us to know. After all, if we knew the contents of the last 2 tests, as long as we came prepared, our chances of passing the test would greatly increase. The Jiaxin Academy wouldn't let this happen. Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes flashed with a trace of disappointment. However, he also understood that the last 2 tests were the most important criteria for the Jiaxin Academy's outer court enrollment. Only those who performed well in the last 2 tests would have a chance of entering the outer court. Chapter 959. Arriving at Jiaxin Island in the boundless sea of bitterness, terrifying black waves rolled and soared into the sky. It was as if there was a huge black dragon hidden in the sea of bitterness, roaring and tossing on the surface of the sea from time to time. It was a magnificent scene. A huge sailboat broke through the countless black waves like a bolt of lightning, passing through the countless waves and sweeping into the distance. On the other side of the sea of bitterness, a vast piece of land was faintly discernible in the black waves. It seemed so close yet so far away. When the boundless sailboat gradually approached the piece of land, many cultivators on the deck also started to notice the faintly discernible piece of land in the distance. When the sailboat was 10 miles away from the piece of land, many cultivators on the deck realized that the piece of land was actually an island. It was just that the island was too huge. If they didn't observe it closely, they wouldn't have realized that it was just a huge island floating in the sea of bitterness. Is the outer courtyard of the Jiaxin Academy on this island? Many cultivators couldn't help muttering as they stared at the huge island before them. The Jiaxin Academy was an extremely mysterious existence to the cultivators of the eastern lands on the other side of the Sea of Bitterness. The 9 Netherworld realm was even more mysterious and illusory. It was rumored that the 9 Netherworld realm existed in the deepest part of the Sea of Bitterness. However, the Sea of Bitterness was boundless, with no end in sight. Even the boundless sailboat in the desolate ancient city might not be able to reach the end of the Sea of Bitterness. In other words, it was unrealistic to rely on oneself to find the 9 Netherworld realm. If outsiders wanted to enter the 9 Netherworld realm, they would have to be led by someone from the 9 Netherworld realm. Outsiders wouldn't be able to find the entrance to the 9 Netherworld realm. Jian Mu, who had relied on his own strength to cross the Sea of Bitterness, should be a cultivator from the 9 Netherworld realm. Crossing the Sea of Bitterness meant returning to the 9 Netherworld realm alone. Other than having a cultivator from the 9 Netherworld realm lead the way, there was another method, which was to enter the 9 Netherworld realm through the outer courtyard of the Jiaxin Academy. This could be considered as a shortcut to enter the 9 Netherworld realm. At this moment, the Flame Emperor, Toan, and the other geniuses of the Yanxian Empire were gathered on the deck. Their gazes were all looking at the huge island before them, with hope in their eyes. They were about to arrive at the Divine Institute. This was the thought in the hearts of many martial artists. Who would have thought that the Divine College would be located on an island? Also, this bitter sea is really huge as far as the eye can see. 5 Elements Sex K2 said casually. The Sea of Bitterness is boundless, and no one knows how big it is. Moreover, in this huge Sea of Bitterness, there isn't just this one island in front of us. There are many other islands. This boundless sailboat can carry tens of thousands of people. Not all of them will go to the island of Fine God Academy, but some will go to other islands. The Flame Emperor explained faintly, which piqued the curiosity of Zhuowen and the rest. They did not expect that there was more than one island in the Sea of Misery. It seemed that the Sea of Misery was not as simple as they had imagined. Zhuowen nodded in agreement. In the 3 days that he had been in the third-class cabin, he had seen many older martial artists. There were even some martial artists who were carrying some specialties and items from the outside world. The goal of these martial artists was definitely not the Divine College, but the other islands. Perhaps they were bringing the items from the outside world to the other islands to trade for things like spirit stones. After all, the outside world was much bigger than the Sea of Misery, and there were many different types of items. Looking at the Bitter Sea, it was a barren land, and there were not many martial artists. Naturally, it was not as rich as the outside world. If they were to sell the items on the other islands, the price would be several times higher. While Zhuowen's attention was on the island in front of them, a cold gaze was cast on Zhuowen, causing Zhuowen's gaze to freeze. He turned his head and met the gaze of the owner of the cold gaze. The owner of the gaze was no stranger to Zhun. It was the third prince of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty, Yuanxing, who had a conflict with Zhuowen 3 days ago. Seeing Zhuowen looking over, Yuanxing's gaze was cold, and he immediately turned his head away. Zhuowen's eyes flashed coldly. If this Yuanxing did not know what was good for him and provoked him again, Yuan did not mind eliminating the source of trouble. Although the emperor's aura on Yuanxing's body was terrifying, it could only threaten ordinary heavenly masters. If Zhuowen was in his demon state, he would not be afraid of the emperor's aura at all. When the ship was 3 miles away from the island, a figure suddenly rushed out from the cabin below the ship. He stepped on the void and came to the deck, a pair of sharp eyes staring at the island in front of him. This person was about 40 years old, and he was dressed in coarse clothes. He looked ordinary, but the aura he exuded made many people tremble. This person was definitely a terrifying Emperor Realm Master. Drop the anchor. When the ship was 1 mile away from the island, the master floating above the deck finally spoke. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, a terrifying yuan power surged out and turned into 8 huge palms. Like the tentacles of an octopus, they swept towards the ship in all directions. Clang! The sound of chains colliding rang out. Then, the 8 palms pulled out 8 huge anchors from the ship's surface. The 8 palms exerted force, and the 8 thick anchors were plunged into the water. Buzz, 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 buzz. A loud sound of friction rang out, and the boundless ship's speed gradually came to a stop. At this moment, they were only half a mile away from the island. On the shore of the island, there was already a group of people wearing the same uniform waiting. They were probably the people from the Fine God Academy who had come to receive the geniuses. Open the seal and lower the viaduct. The Emperor Realm Master in the air roared again. The purple halo above the deck faded, and a half-mile-long viaduct was formed in front of the ship. We have arrived at the Fine God Island. Our destination is the outer court of the Fine God Academy. Passengers may disembark. Remember, you must walk on the viaduct. Once these words were spoken, some of the young martial artists were already impatient. They did not follow the Emperor Realm Master's words and directly flew towards the shore. Suddenly, 3 screams rang out. The first 3 young martial artists who flew out seemed to be affected by a terrifying gravitational force the moment they stepped off the ship. One after another, they fell into the Bitter Sea. When they fell into the Bitter Sea, a terrifying corrosive force spread throughout their bodies, making them unable to resist. Their bodies were slowly corroded, from their feet to their bodies. Finally, they turned into a pool of black water. This. Gasps could be heard one after another. Originally, there were many cultivators at the back who thought it was troublesome and wanted to directly cross the sea of bitterness to reach the shore. But now, all of them stopped in their tracks, their legs trembling, and they didn't dare to take another step. The Bitter Sea is a cursed sea. Above the Bitter Sea, there is an extremely terrifying gravitational force. Martial artists below the Emperor Realm who wish to fly above the Bitter Sea are simply courting death. The Emperor Realm Master hovering above the deck glanced indifferently at the martial artists who had turned into 3 pools of black water. He slowly opened his mouth and continued, "Even Emperor Realm Masters will not be able to hold on for long if they fall into the Bitter Sea. If you think you are strong enough, you can fly like the 3 people just now. There is no need to walk on the viaduct." As soon as these words were spoken, many people cursed in their hearts. 3 exalted realm cultivators had died for no reason. With such a precedent, how could they possibly treat their own lives as a joke? Hence, the martial artists on the deck followed the viaduct in an orderly manner and slowly walked down the shore. The Flame Emperor also brought Zhuowen, Mo Lingtian, and the rest. They blended in with the crowd, looking very ordinary. After all the martial artists on the deck had disembarked, the Emperor Realm Master on the deck shouted again and steered the boundless sailboat towards the other islands. Once the boundless sailboat left, everyone's gaze landed on the group of people wearing uniforms on the shore. They knew that this group of people should be the martial artists sent by the Divine Academy to receive them. However, what surprised everyone was that this group of 20 people were all at the Heavenly Venerate Realm. The weakest was at the initial stage of the Heavenly Venerate Realm, while the strongest was at the peak of the Heavenly Venerate Realm. Moreover, these 20 people were not old. The average age was no more than 30 years old. They should be students from the Outer Academy. This group of people was led by a man and a woman. The man was cultured and elegant, and his actions were appropriate. The woman was charming and had good looks. They could be considered a perfect match. The man walked forward with a smile and said, "You must be the juniors who came from the outside world to participate in the Outer Academy assessment. My name is Chung Dong, and I'm likely to become the senior of many of you. This time, the Outer Academy sent me to receive you." So it's Senior Chung Dong. When I was in the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty, I often heard of Senior Chung Dong's name. You are a genius on the Heavenly Venerate list. Chung Dong's eyes lit up. He stared at Yuan Xing and said, "You are from the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty? How are Yuan Zhao and Yuan Kong related to you?" Yuan Xing raised his eyebrows slightly and said with a smile, "They are my brothers. Yuan Zhao is my eldest brother, and Yuan Kong is my second brother." So that's how it is. Your eldest brother and second brother are very talented. In the test a few days ago, their results were very good, and they were crowned as monsters. It's worth mentioning that your eldest brother, Yuan Zhao, is very talented. I believe it won't be long before he can enter the Heavenly Venerate list, Chung Dong suddenly said with a smile. Eldest brother and second brother both passed the test? Yuan Xing's face flushed red, and his eyes were filled with excitement. Many cultivators in the surroundings looked at them with envy. The Yaoguang Holy Dynasty was indeed worthy of being one of the 7 strongest forces in the outside world. Yuan Zhao and Yuan Kong's talents were actually praised by Chung Dong. Moreover, this Yuan Xing's talent was also not weak. It was likely that he would also be able to enter the Outer Academy. Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's blue smoke greets Senior Chung Dong. Chapter 960. Arcane Heavenly Master. Oh? You're from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty? Your Blue Whale Holy Dynasty isn't bad either. The Blue Whale Crown Prince from a few days ago also performed well in the test. His talent isn't any weaker than Yuan Zhao's. You should perform well too. Cheng Dong looked at Blue Smoke and smiled. The Crown Prince is the son of the Holy Dynasty's emperor. Blue Smoke can't compare to him. Being able to enter the outer court is already Blue Smoke's greatest satisfaction. Blue Smoke cupped his hands and said ambiguously. However, when Chung Dong mentioned the Blue Whale Crown Prince, Blue Smoke's eyes flashed with sharpness. Clearly, he was just being polite when he said that he couldn't compare to the Blue Whale Crown Prince. Cheng Dong nodded. His gaze once again landed on the other 2 groups of people in the crowd. One of them was wearing a fiery red long robe with a cluster of flames embroidered on their robes. Moreover, the strange thing was that the flames suddenly became like real flames. They continuously danced and burned, emitting a scorching heat. Many cultivators nearby couldn't stand the high temperature and avoided this group of people. You're from the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty, right? Cheng Dong asked with a smile. This group of people cupped their hands at Cheng Dong. A young man with fiery red hair smiled and said, Senior Cheng Dong really has sharp eyes. I'm Fan Ji from the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty. Cheng Dong waved his hand and said with a smile, It's not that I have sharp eyes, but the symbol on your robes is too obvious. It's hard not to connect you to the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty. The group of people standing on the other side of the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty slowly walked out. This group of people was as thick as monsters, especially their arms, which were almost as thick as an ordinary person's thigh. Yuan Tong from the Divine Arm Holy Dynasty greets Senior Cheng Dong. A robust young man with dark skin cupped his hands at Cheng Dong and smiled. The smile on his face looked very simple and honest. Chung Dong nodded and said meaningfully, "This class is really coincidental. The people of the 4 great sacred dynasties from the outside world came together, and yesterday, the disciples of the Myriad Sword Sect, Cold Moon Palace, and Yellow Mystic Sect also came together. Their sect doesn't want to be associated with our holy dynasty's people, so they chose to travel on a ship that was 1 shift earlier than ours." Yuan Tong shrugged helplessly. Cheng Dong nodded. Clearly, he was aware of the grudges between the 4 great sacred dynasties and the 3 great sects, so he didn't dwell on this topic. Instead, he waved his hand and said, "Follow me to the outer courtyard. Once you're there, you can take the basic test." After saying that, Cheng Dong and the group of 20 people walked along the main road ahead. Behind them, nearly 1,000 cultivators looked at each other and followed behind Cheng Dong. Zhuan glanced at the people of the Divine Arm Holy Dynasty and the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty. These 2 holy dynasties were extremely low-key, and when Cheng Dong mentioned the people of these 2 holy dynasties, he wasn't as close as he was to Yuanxing and Blue Smoke. Cheng Dong's different treatment made Zhuan realize that the foundation of the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty and the Divine Arm Holy Dynasty should be ranked at the bottom of the 4 great sacred dynasties. Moreover, the more famous geniuses of these 2 holy dynasties were only Yuan Tong and Fenji. They weren't like the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty and the Alcade Holy Dynasty. However, even so, Yuan Tong and Fenji's cultivation were very strong. At the very least, they were at the Golden Venerable Realm. Moreover, the foundation of a holy dynasty like this was usually extremely rich. They probably had extremely powerful trump cards on them, making them much more difficult to deal with than ordinary cultivators. This island is called Excellent God Island. I think everyone has heard of this name before. It's named after our Excellent God Academy. Cheng Dong walked in front and introduced the Excellent God Island to the many cultivators behind him in a clear voice. Moreover, from his appearance, it seemed that he was very proud of being able to become a member of the Excellent God Academy. There was a trace of pride between his brows from time to time. Of course, it wasn't just Cheng Dong. The other 20 students of the Excellent God Academy who came with Cheng Dong had proud expressions on their faces. They weren't any weaker than Cheng Dong's. The Excellent God Island is 100,000 miles wide. There are countless peaks and mountain ranges. Moreover, what's even rarer is that there is a huge yuan vein on this Excellent God Island. The cultivation speed in the Excellent God Academy is several times faster than the outside world. All of this is because of the yuan vein on the island. Cheng Dong continued his introduction. Yuan vein? I didn't expect that the Excellent God Island would contain a yuan vein. No wonder the geniuses who entered the Excellent God Academy all have terrifying strength and monstrous battle prowess after learning something. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. He naturally knew about yuan veins. Yuan veins contained extremely pure yuan qi. This pure yuan qi didn't need to be overly refined by cultivators and could be directly transformed into yuan qi. Generally, when cultivators absorbed the yuan qi of heaven and earth, they would need to undergo refinement before they could transform it into yuan qi. Therefore, cultivators would need to spend a large amount of time to refine the impurities in the yuan qi of heaven and earth. Only then would they feel at ease transforming the yuan qi into yuan qi and storing it in their dantian. However, the pure yuan qi within the yuan vein didn't have any impurities. Cultivators didn't need to spend too much time refining the yuan qi within the yuan vein. They could directly absorb the yuan qi and refine it into yuan qi. Without a doubt, cultivators who relied on the yuan vein to cultivate would have a much faster cultivation speed. This was also a shortcut to increasing one's cultivation in a short period of time. Looking at the amazed expressions of the people behind him, the corners of Cheng Dong's mouth curled up. He was naturally very satisfied with everyone's reaction. Our Excellent God Academy's outer court is located in a city in the center of the island. Of course, there are other cities on the Excellent God Island, but they aren't as strong as our Excellent God Academy. As Cheng Dong spoke, he led everyone to soar into the sky. He pointed to the center of the island and continued, "That city is the main city of the Excellent God Academy." Everyone looked over. What entered their eyes was a huge city that was as terrifying as a giant beast. The surface of the city was emitting a milky white light. The milky white light was like a steaming fog. It floated in the air and formed a funnel-like white cyclone. Everyone was very familiar with the milky white light. It was the Yuan Qi. Only extremely pure Yuan Qi would emit a milky white light. It was very obvious that within the main city of the Excellent God Academy, there was a huge Yuan vein. The milky white Yuan Qi was extracted from the Yuan vein. Other than the huge city in the center, there were other cities in the surroundings of the main city of the Excellent God Academy. There were many cities of different sizes scattered around the area. In the process of passing through these cities, you have to be careful at all times. You have to reveal your identity as a student of the Excellent God Academy. Otherwise, you will be easily attacked by them. Now, follow me closely. If you lose track of me, you will be killed by the warriors in the nearby cities. Cheng Dong cautioned them. He floated in the air and flew forward at a constant speed. Everyone behind felt a chill in their hearts. It seemed that the Excellent God Island wasn't as safe as they had imagined. If they couldn't reveal their identity as a student of the Excellent God Academy, they would be killed as a foreign species. Follow closely. The Flame Emperor reminded Zhuowen, Mo Lingtian, and the others. The group silently followed behind the large group. Sure enough, when the group flew past a nearby city, a group of warriors rushed out from the city and stared at them vigilantly. However, these people quickly saw that Cheng Dong and the others were wearing the uniform of the Excellent God Academy. They didn't make a move. Moreover, the warriors in these cities were very strong. Although there weren't any Emperor Realm experts, there were quite a few Golden Exalts and Heavenly Exalts. Most of the people who came to take the test were from the Xuanzuan realm. There weren't many Supreme Exalted geniuses. As for Golden Exalts, there were probably only geniuses from the 4 great sacred dynasties. There weren't any Heavenly Exalts among the 1,000 people. This Excellent God Island is really mysterious. There are so many experts. Kanan and Gatha followed beside Juan. Kanan couldn't help but murmur in excitement. After 3 days of interaction, Yuan naturally recognized Kanan and Gatha's character. In addition, it was very likely that Kanan had the undying armor soul. Therefore, Yuan wanted to befriend Kanan and Gatha. Therefore, the 2 siblings were quite dependent on Zhuowen. Moreover, the 2 siblings knew that Zhuowen came from the Qing Xian Empire. Although the Qing Xian Empire was much stronger than the Far West Land, it was still lacking compared to the 4 great holy empires and the 3 great sections. As long as you enter the Excellent God Academy, you can also reach that height, or even stronger, Zhuowen said with a smile. I will. Kanan raised his fist and nodded. After a while, Cheng Dong led the group and landed in the main city of the Excellent God Academy. As soon as they stepped into the main city, everyone was pleasantly surprised to find that the Yuan Qi here was dozens of times denser than other places on the Excellent God Island. There should be a powerful arcanist in the outer courtyard who set up such a Yuan Qi gathering array. It can gather most of the Yuan Qi in the underground Yuan vein in the main city for the students of the Excellent God Academy to cultivate. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. Zhuowen nodded. He was, after all, a grade 5 Great Perfection Arcanist. Naturally, he could feel the strong spiritual fluctuations in the primary gathering array. The spiritual fluctuations were even stronger than Elder Shi ones. It was likely that the arcanist who set up the primary gathering array had a stronger spiritual power than Elder Shun. Elder Shiwan was a complete grade 6 arcanist. An arcanist who was stronger than the former could only be a legendary grade 7 arcanist. If the arcanist who set up this Yuan Qi gathering array is really a grade 7 arcanist, then it's really amazing. This is more terrifying than an ordinary Emperor Realm expert. Moreover, grade 7 arcanists have another title, which is Arcanist Heavenly Master. In a sense, the grade 7 Yuan Qi gathering array set up by Arcanist Heavenly Master is a terrifying formation that is comparable to a demonic weapon. Xiao Hei's voice became serious. It was obvious that the Arcanist Heavenly Master he mentioned should be an extremely powerful existence. Chapter 961. Blood Drop Test. The crowd landed in an extremely spacious square. At this moment, the square was filled with a sea of people and was filled with noise. Moreover, they realized that most of the people in the square were young warriors. Obviously, the warriors in the square were basically geniuses from other regions who had come to participate in the entrance test. Although Chengdong's arrival with nearly 1,000 people attracted a lot of attention, the area of the square was too big, enough to accommodate tens of thousands of people. Compared to the 1,000 people Chengdong had brought, it was like a small child in the presence of an adult. Therefore, the crowd in the square only glanced at the crowd behind Chengdong before they quickly retracted their gazes and hurriedly lined up to take the test. The family members, elders, or servants of the warriors who are taking the test, please wait there. You are not allowed to approach the test area without permission. After landing in the square, Chengdong pointed to the empty space on the other side of the square and spoke to the crowd behind him. At this moment, there were many older warriors standing on the empty space. They were probably the warriors who had accompanied the warriors who were taking the test. Zhuan turned around and said to Xiang Tianzuan and the other 4 who were standing respectfully behind him, "The 5 of you can go to the empty space and wait there first." When Xiang Tianzuan and the other 4 heard this, they nodded and walked straight to the empty space. The other people who had accompanied the warriors in the group also left. Among them, Yan Di gave some instructions to the crowd and did not stay for long. The group of nearly 1,000 people had shrunk by 2/3, leaving only about 300 people. Follow me to the registration area in front of the square. However, there will be a basic test waiting for you there. Of course, if anyone wants to fish in troubled waters, I think they should give up on that idea as soon as possible. Chengdong glanced at the crowd, then waved his sleeves and led the crowd to the front of the square. At the end of the square, there were many counters. Behind each counter stood an expressionless young man in a long black robe. On each counter, there was a palm-sized blood-colored crystal. No one knew what it was for. Chengdong led everyone to the back of one of the counters. This counter also had the fewest number of people in line. However, this was relative. Zhuan estimated that there were at least 800 to 900 people in front of this line. Including the 300 new members that joined them, there were almost 1,200 people in line. There are so many people. Zhuan frowned and muttered in a low voice. This is very normal. After all, the Divine Institute's reputation in the outside world is too great. Moreover, the Eastern lands is vast and there are countless warriors. Every time the Divine Institute recruits students, the scene would be similar. Mo Lingtian, who was standing beside Zhuan, laughed softly. Xian Xing, K2, and Zui Qingfeng followed behind Mo Lingtian. After all, Mo Lingtian was the true number 1 among the younger generation of the Yanxian Empire. Although Zhuan's strength wasn't much weaker than Mo Lingtian's, Yuan wasn't someone from the Yanxian Empire. Naturally, they couldn't completely trust Zhuan. That's right. It'll be dark before it's our turn. Zhuan shrugged and said without a care. A martial artist's cultivation was measured by months and years. To be able to become a genius martial artist, their patience was not bad. This kind of waiting would not make them feel too impatient. 23 years old, Xuanzuan Realm's early stage, pass. 22 years old, Xuanzuan Realm's late stage, pass. 22 years old, Sovereign Realm's early stage, not bad, pass. 30 years old, Xuanzuan Realm's early stage. Uncle, you're already 25 years old, but you're only at the early stage of the Xuanzuan Realm's early stage. Don't you feel ashamed? You're not qualified, scram. 23 years old, half step into the Xuanzuan Realm. Brother, don't embarrass yourself with your cultivation. Scram. The examiner at the front was like the strictest judge as he announced the results of the test. Naturally, there were people who were happy and people who were worried. In particular, some older martial artists who wanted to take advantage of the situation, or martial artists whose cultivation did not pass the test, were mercilessly exposed by the testers. This made them feel ashamed as they quickly left the square. What surprised Zhuan was that there were quite a number of such people who wanted to take advantage of the situation. There was a tendency for them to take advantage of the situation, which annoyed the examiner to no end. Once, he even seriously injured one of the people who wanted to take advantage of the situation as an example to others. As the team moved forward, it was Zhuowen's turn soon. These 300 people had all set off from the ancient barren city together. Although there were some people who wanted to take advantage of the situation, they were much fewer than the previous team. 22 years old, initial Golden Venerate realm, you're not bad, pass. Suddenly, the examiner at the front raised his voice and attracted the attention of many people. Even the warriors at the other counters noticed Zhuowen's team and their eyes fell on the figure in front of them. Zhuowen was naturally familiar with this person. He was Yuanxing, the third prince of the Alcade sacred dynasty. He was able to reach the initial Golden Venerate realm at the age of 22. His talent was indeed extraordinary. The examiner's gaze softened. Yuanxing raised his chin high, obviously enjoying the attention from the surrounding people. Then, like a proud peacock, he walked towards the candidate selection hall behind the counter. Behind Yuanxing was Blue Smoke of the Blue Whale Sacred Dynasty. Blue Smoke still had a warm smile on his face. Under the guidance of the examiner, he cut his finger and dripped a drop of blood on the blood-red crystal. An extremely dazzling light gushed out. Then, the examiner looked at Blue Smoke in surprise and said loudly, "You're very good. 23 years old, late Golden Venerate realm, pass." As soon as the examiner landed, many people in the surroundings looked over again. This team in front of them was somewhat extraordinary. It hadn't been long since the test started, and 2 Golden Venerate realm geniuses had already been tested. However, the shocking results were yet to come. Yuan Tong of the Divine Arms Sacred Dynasty and Fan Ji of the Burning Flames Sacred Dynasty were both in the Golden Venerate realm. Yuan Tong was in the Middle Golden Venerate realm, while Fan Ji and Blue Smoke were in the Late Golden Venerate realm. 4 Golden Venerate realm geniuses had appeared consecutively. The examiner at the counter couldn't help but smile from ear to ear. As for the other cultivators in the queue, they were all dumbfounded. They subconsciously thought that they were hallucinating. Those who had reached the Xuanzuan realm before the age of 25 could be crowned as geniuses. Supremes were peerless geniuses, Golden Venerates were monstrous geniuses, and Heavenly Venerates were monstrous geniuses. The outer court test had already started for 3 days. However, only the first day of the test had more monstrous geniuses. Among them, there were even monstrous geniuses. Today, there were 4 of them, and all 4 of them were in the same team. The other examiners at the counter were filled with envy. The examiners at the counter also had benefits. The more geniuses they tested, the more benefits they would receive. The examiners at the counter in front of Zhuowen's team had tested 4 monstrous geniuses at once. After the test ended, the examiners would naturally give him a lot of benefits. That was why the other examiners were filled with envy. On the other hand, the other people in Zhuowen's team were much calmer. Yuanxing, Blue Smoke, and the other 3 were the top geniuses of the 4 great sacred dynasties. If they hadn't reached the Golden Venerate realm, they would have found it strange. The team moved forward at a moderate pace. Soon, it was Zhuowen's turn. When it was Mo Lingtian's turn, the latter smiled and came to the counter to drip his blood for the test. 23 years old, peak supremes. Not bad, you pass. The examiner was in a good mood. He nodded at Mo Lingtian and allowed him to pass through the counter and enter the back. After that, Zue Qingfeng, Xian Xing, and K2, who were behind Mo Lingtian, naturally passed the test as well. Sister, don't be afraid. It's just a drop of blood. When it was Jia Nan's turn, she first encouraged Gatha behind her. Then she came to the counter and dripped her blood for the test. 19 years old, Middle Xuanzuan realm. You pass. After the examiner finished speaking, Jia Nan passed through the counter and came to the back. She stared at Gatha and Zhuowen with a smile on her face. Gatha was a little nervous. Her face was pale, and she didn't know what to do. However, a broad hand landed on Gatha's shoulder. Then, Gatha saw a gentle smile. Gatha, don't be afraid. Your big brother and I are watching you, Zhuowen said gently. Hearing this, Gatha's heart calmed. She nodded firmly and said softly, Thank you, big brother Zhua. As she spoke, Gatha walked to the counter. She bit her thumb with her silver teeth and dripped a drop of blood. 18 years old, Middle Schwanzuan realm. You pass. The examiner looked at Gatha again. Reaching the Middle Schwanzuan realm at the age of 18. This little girl and the young man just now had great potential. After she finished speaking, Gatha passed through the counter and came to Jianan's side. The two siblings looked at Zhuowen's test results together. The examiner looked at Zhuowen and said calmly. Zhuowen stepped forward and casually dripped a drop of blood. With his cultivation and age, there was no doubt that he would pass. Therefore, Yuan didn't seem to care. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. However, something strange happened. When Zhuowen's blood fell on the blood-colored crystal, the blood-colored crystal suddenly emitted a strange blood aura instead of light. This blood aura flowed through the wound on Zhuowen's thumb and surged into Zhuowen's body. Then, Yuan felt a warm power spread throughout his body. Buzz. The crimson crystal began to tremble violently. Zhuowen discovered that the energy surging out of the crimson crystal faintly had a trace of perfect compatibility with the demon path of massacre that he cultivated. It was actually able to strengthen the demon path of massacre. Feeling the throbbing of the demon path of massacre in his body, Zhuowen frowned and thought to himself, could this blood-red crystal be related to the demon path of massacre? The examiner at the counter panicked. He didn't know why this would happen to the blood-red crystal. This had never happened before. What did you do just now? After thinking about it, the examiner knew that it must be because of the young man in front of him. He couldn't help but ask. Crack. Chapter 962. Retesting crack. A clear shattering sound rang out from the counter. Soon after, the originally noisy surroundings immediately became silent. One could even hear a pin drop as everyone's gazes converged on the counter where Zhuowen was located. The testing crystal had actually shattered. This was something that had never happened in the past few days of testing. Is there a problem with the testing crystal on the counter? Or is it because of this young man? After the silence, there was an uproar. Many people pointed at Zhuowen, who was standing in front of the counter, with strange gazes. Standing in the open space behind the counter, the cultivators who had passed the test also looked over. Among them, Yuanxing from the Alcade Holy Dynasty smirked, revealing a trace of mockery. Blue smoke from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty narrowed his eyes. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. The others also had strange expressions on their faces. After all, this was the first time they had seen a testing crystal shattering. Jianan and Gatha, the two siblings, looked worried. They didn't know whether the result of the testing crystal shattering was good or bad. Zhuowen sank into deep thought. The blood-red crystal contained an extremely strong power of slaughter. This power of slaughter was extremely beneficial to his cultivation of the demonic path of slaughter. When his blood came into contact with the blood-red crystal, it resonated with the demonic massacre path in his body. In addition to the tyrannical style of the demonic massacre path, the slaughter energy in the crystal was directly absorbed by the demonic massacre path in his body. What is the origin of this crystal? Zhuowen wondered inwardly. Boom! A terrifying aura filled the air. Then, the tester standing in front of the counter stared coldly at Zhuowen and asked, "Let me ask you, what did you do just now? How did you cause the blood crystal to shatter? A heavenly venerable?" Zhuowen took several steps back and looked at the testing staff in front of the counter. His eyes revealed a trace of surprise. This divine academy was truly extraordinary. The testing staff they sent out was actually an Empyrean powerhouse. However, looking at the overbearing tester, Zhuowen said indifferently, "I'm just following your instructions and dripping my essence and blood into this crimson crystal. As for why the crimson crystal shattered, what does that have to do with me? Perhaps there's a problem with its quality." Zhuowen naturally would not admit that the shattering of the blood crystal had something to do with him. After all, judging from the expression of the tester, the blood crystal should be very valuable. If he admitted it, the tester would definitely not let the matter rest. Hence, he could only use this as an excuse. The examiner narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "This didn't happen when the others were tested. Why did it shatter when it was your turn?" If it's not you, who else could it be? Seeing that the tester was unwilling to let him off, Zhuan frowned and said, I really don't know anything about the blood crystal. What do you want? The tester sneered and said, the blood crystal is something that I painstakingly obtained from Azura Island. Its value is immeasurable. However, since you are a newcomer, I'll charge you 500,000 high-grade spirit stones. What? As soon as these words came out, there was an uproar in the surroundings. Obviously, no one thought that this tester would demand such an exorbitant price. A small blood crystal actually cost 500,000 high-grade spirit stones. Wasn't this robbery? Of course, many people's eyes were filled with ridicule. After all, the one to compensate wasn't them, but Tun, who had shattered the blood crystal. What a pitiful kid! Yuan Sheng ridiculed from the open space behind the counter. Zhuo Wen's complexion turned unsightly. 500,000 high-grade spirit stones could buy a good quality emperor-level spiritual treasure. However, this tiny blood crystal could be compared to an emperor-level spiritual treasure. Zhuo Wen knew that the tester was probably asking for an exorbitant price to extort him. Wu Sheng, I still have a blood crystal here. Why don't you use it first? Maybe there really was a problem with the blood crystal just now? Suddenly, a gentle and warm voice was heard. Soon after, Cheng Dong had unknowingly arrived in front of the counter where Zhuowen was at. A similar blood crystal lay on his palm. So it's Senior Cheng Dong. However, this blood crystal was obtained by you. How could I dare to take it? The tester named Wu Sheng quickly waved his hand and said. Cheng Dong shook his head and said, your blood crystal is broken, but the test will continue. Also, this little brother is a newcomer to the academy. Blood crystals have always been extremely hard. I'm afraid that your blood crystal might really be an accident. Hearing Cheng Dong's words, Wu Sheng could only agree. He took Cheng Dong's blood crystal and coldly stared at Tun. Continue the test? If this blood crystal breaks again, you won't be able to explain yourself even if you have 100 mouths. Thank you so much, Senior Cheng Dong. Tun cupped his hands at Cheng Dong, but the latter waved his hand and laughed. There's no need for that. After all, I was the one who brought you here. I can't just ignore it and be irresponsible. Zhuo nodded. He had a good impression of Cheng Dong. This person was upright, just, and not weak. Therefore, Zhuan secretly remembered this favor. You're already calling me senior brother. Do you really think that you'll be able to enter the academy? Wu Sheng said indifferently. Zhuan glanced at Wu Sheng indifferently and said, you don't have to worry about that. Let's start the test now. Wu Sheng's expression was slightly sluggish. He looked at Zhuowen's indifferent attitude and said coldly, Let's start the test now. As he spoke, Wu Sheng took Cheng Dong's blood crystal and placed it in front of Zhuan. However, his gaze was fixed on Zhuan. If the blood crystal broke again, he wouldn't mind killing this arrogant brat on the spot. Taking a deep breath, Zhuan began to silently suppress the murderous demonic energy in his body. He then dripped a drop of blood on it. Immediately, the blood crystal emitted a blazing blood-red glow. However, it wasn't like the first time, where blood energy gushed out. The blood-red glow appeared for a while before it slowly receded and returned to its original state. Zhuowen said indifferently, the blood crystal didn't break. Can you announce the results now? Wu Sheng narrowed his eyes and snorted. 20 years old, middle-stage supreme being. Qualified. The corners of Zhuowen's lips curled up. He walked past Wu Sheng and entered the empty space behind the counter to meet up with Jia Nan and Gatha. Cheng Dong glanced at Zhuowen's back. Being able to reach the middle-stage supreme being at the age of 20, this brat's potential wasn't bad. Wu Sheng, continue the test. The blood crystal must have broken because of the blood crystal. I'll take my leave first. Cheng Dong said to Wu Sheng and walked towards the empty space behind the counter. However, Wu Sheng's face was filled with depression as he muttered to himself. Could it be that there was really a problem with his blood crystal? The empty space behind the counter was huge. There were thousands of cultivators standing in the empty space, chatting in groups of 3 to 5. These people were all geniuses who had passed the foundational test. Cheng Dong's arrival caused everyone to stop chatting. Their eyes were bright as they stared at Cheng Dong. This Chung Dong could be considered as one of the people in charge of the recruitment of new students this time around. Naturally, no one dared to slight him. First of all, congratulations to everyone for passing the foundational test. However, this is only the first stage of the recruitment, so everyone shouldn't be arrogant. There are still 2 more tests. The results of these 2 tests will determine whether you can enter the Divine Academy's outer court. As Chung Dong spoke till here, he looked around and discovered that the majority of the people in the empty space had excited expressions on their faces. There were even some restless fellows who were itching to make trouble. A trace of satisfaction appeared on their faces. All of you should know that the outer court recruitment test will last for a total of 7 days. However, these 7 days are used to select qualified cultivators. This is the so-called foundational test. Therefore, the second stage of the test will only begin after the foundational test is over. Cheng Dong said faintly. As for the restless cultivators in the empty space, their faces fell. Right now, they were filled with self-satisfaction and wanted to proceed to the next stage of the test. However, Chung Dong had actually said that they would have to wait for 7 days before proceeding to the second stage of the test. In other words, they would have to wait for another 4 days. Seeing the disappointment on the faces of many cultivators, the corners of Cheng Dong's mouth curled up slightly as he continued, "4 days shouldn't be too long for you. You can wait here in the candidate area for 4 days. When the 7 days are up, we will gather all the qualified cultivators together. At that time, we will divide them into groups." Everyone nodded. They knew that this was the rule set by the Divine Academy's recruitment. After all, the outer court wasn't recruiting just 1 or 2 people. They were recruiting from the entire Eastern continent. Even if those who came were the top geniuses of various forces, the Eastern continent was vast. Forces were like bamboo shoots after a spring rain, and their numbers were numerous. Every force had sent a few geniuses to come. Many a little makes an ocean, and the number was terrifying. Fortunately, cultivators had excellent patience. Although there were a few who complained, the majority of the cultivators sat down cross-legged in the empty space after their disappointment. They wanted to use these 4 days to train and raise their own cultivation so that they could prepare for the next test. Cheng Dong said a few more words before leaving the place. He walked towards the testing plaza. After all, the test was still in progress, and he couldn't leave for too long. There are really many cultivators participating in the test this time. I'm afraid there are more than 100,000, right? Mo Lingtian said with a smile as he sat beside Zhuan. Zhuan didn't mind. He nodded and said, "However, I'm afraid that more than 2/3 of the foundational tests will be eliminated. There should only be about 30,000 people who can enter the second stage of the test. The elimination rate for the second and third stages is even more terrifying. At that time, the number of people who can enter the outer court will be very few." Mo Lingtian nodded in agreement and said, "The Divine Academy pursues the path of the elite. Just being a genius isn't enough. You must be a genius among geniuses to be able to stand out from the rest and enter the inner court. However, I think that with Brother Zhuo's strength and potential, entering the Divine Academy shouldn't be too much of a problem, right?" Mo Lingtian asked with deep meaning. Chapter 963. Hu Jia, Brother Zhuo, you must be joking. I don't have such confidence. After all, even Brother Zhuoan can't guarantee that he will be able to enter Jiashan Academy. Naturally, I can't guarantee it either, Mo Lingtian said with a smile. We only need to do our best. Whether or not we can enter the academy isn't something we can do just because we want to. After Zhuan finished speaking, he sat cross-legged on the ground and entered a meditative state. Mo Lingtian's eyes flickered. Now, he couldn't see through Zhuan. Whether it was the rumor about the Qing Xian Empire's Zhuan that the Flame Emperor had mentioned, or the fact that Zhuan had chopped off one of Yuansheng's arms on the deck of the boundless sailboat, or the shattering of the blood crystal during Zhuan's test. All of these revealed that the young man in front of him wasn't simple and was even more mysterious. However, it was precisely because of Zhuowen's mysteriousness that made Mo Lingtian want to remove the fog that was covering Zhuowen's body and see the truth. Jia Nan and Gatha sat silently beside Zhuowen and also sat cross-legged on the ground. The two of them were now following Zhuowen's lead. Regardless of whether it was Zhuowen's strength or Zhuowen's attitude towards them, they felt at ease and even a little dependent on him. Time flew by like a white steed flitting by a crack. 4 days passed very quickly. During these 4 days, the testing square was filled with a sea of people. There was an endless stream of young warriors who came to take the test. So much so that the huge square almost couldn't fit them all. Although there were more and more warriors who came to take the test, there were fewer and fewer warriors who could pass. Most of them were people who took advantage of the situation. When the first ray of sunlight shone through the clouds in the morning, a cool morning breeze blew past, bringing a refreshing feeling. The 7 days of foundational testing had finally come to an end. The originally noisy testing plaza had finally become much quieter than before. Those warriors who didn't pass the test were basically brought out of the main city by the people of Divine Academy. They were prepared to send them back. Even if those warriors who didn't pass were unwilling, it was useless. Under the strict orders of Divine Academy, they could only leave the main city unwillingly. In the open space, Zhuowen and the other cultivators opened their eyes one after another, revealing a wisp of light. They slowly stood up, and then their gazes all fell on the other side of the square, where a figure was slowly walking over. Senior Qingdong. Everyone stared at this figure excitedly. This person was the gentle-looking Qingdong. Everyone knew that Qingdong's arrival was very likely to bring them to participate in the second stage of the test, so everyone's eyes were filled with hope. The corners of Qingdong's mouth curled up slightly and he said, "There are more than 10,000 of you here. Come with me. I'll bring you to the location of the second stage of the test. There are 2 other batches of geniuses waiting there." 2 other batches? Zhuan and Mo Lingtian looked at each other, seeing the doubt in each other's eyes. It seemed that this batch of warriors wasn't the only batch participating in the test. There were actually 2 batches of people. One batch had close to 10,000 people. Then wouldn't 3 batches of people be 30,000? This was a terrifying number. You don't have to be so puzzled. There isn't only one testing plaza. There are 2 other testing plazas in the main city. It's just that I'm in charge of this one. Qingdong explained with a faint smile. Only then did everyone feel relieved. Back then, they were directly brought to this plaza by Qingdong. They hadn't wandered around the main city, so they naturally didn't know that there were 2 other testing plazas in the main city. Now, you can summon those who are related to you and follow me to the location of the second stage of the test. After Qingdong finished speaking, the nearly 10,000 warriors in the open space brought their respective people to their sides. The Flame Emperor, Xiang Tianzuan, and the rest also came to the side of Zhuowen, Mo Lingtian, and the other geniuses from the Yenxian Empire. Sush, 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 sush. Everyone brought their respective people. Nearly 10,000 people followed behind Qingdong in a mighty manner. I wonder what the second stage of the test will be like? Jianan clenched his fists and said excitedly. Not only Jianan, but the expressions of the nearly 10,000 people were similar. Whether they were snakes or dragons, whether they could enter the outer yard depended on the remaining 2 stages of the test. However, Zui Qingfeng was a little worried. This time, there are peerless geniuses from the Xuanzuan realm, the Sovereign realm, the Golden Sovereign realm, and even the Heavenly Sovereign realm participating in the test. If they are all tested together, wouldn't those with lower cultivation be at a disadvantage? As soon as he said that, Yun, Mo Lingtian, and the rest nodded their heads. Zui Qingfeng was right. The cultivation of these geniuses was different. It would be fine if they met those with lower cultivation, but if they met those with higher cultivation, it would be disastrous. The Flame Emperor frowned and shook his head. I'm not sure, but the Divine Academy doesn't focus on cultivation. Instead, they focus on talent and potential. I don't think their test will be unfair. Swoosh, swoosh. Soon, the nearly 10,000 people under Qingdong's lead arrived at a huge cliff. The cliff was nearly 10,000 feet high and its surface was as smooth as a mirror. This huge cliff was located in the northwest region of the main city. At the bottom of the cliff, there was a large open space. At this moment, there was already a group of figures standing on the open space. This group of figures was faintly divided into two groups. If one were to count them carefully, there were at least 20,000 of them. This group of figures should be the geniuses that Cheng Dong had mentioned. They should be the geniuses that had been selected from the other two test grounds in the main city. The sound of something breaking through the air resounded, attracting the attention of the nearly 20,000 cultivators on the open space. Soon after, Cheng Dong led the nearly 10,000 people behind him and landed in an open space in the open space. Cheng Dong, you're a little late. We've been waiting here for half an incense stick's time. As soon as Cheng Dong landed, a beautiful figure slowly walked over from one of the groups in the open space and spoke in a somewhat reproachful tone. This beautiful figure was a woman dressed in sexy clothes. Her slender waist swayed gently, and as she walked, there was a seductive and enchanting feeling. Her plump breasts were slightly opened, revealing an alluring curve. Many people in the open space looked at the enchanting woman who was walking over, their eyes filled with intoxication. Although the woman in front of them was not a peerless beauty, she was definitely worth looking at, especially the faintly discernible charm that she revealed, which was always able to firmly attract everyone's attention. This woman knew how to display her charm. It could be said that she was definitely a stunner. Seeing the enchanting woman walking over, Cheng Dong's gaze froze, and he immediately said gloomily, "Hu Jia." There's still half an incense stick of time before the second stage of the test begins. You guys came so early, didn't you have to wait? Now you're blaming me for being late. If you're late, then you're late. Why are you still looking for excuses? Hu Jia curled her lips, her rosy cherry lips pouting. It actually had a different kind of seduction, leaving many geniuses behind Cheng Dong dumbstruck with amazement. But Cheng Dong was somewhat speechless. But Hu Jia was this kind of personality, so Cheng Dong did not care about this either. Instead, his gaze was placed on the open space. Hu Jia's group said, "Looking at your appearance, your mood is pretty good. Could it be that the testing plaza you guys are in has a few good seedlings?" The corners of Hu Jia's mouth curled up slightly, both eyes curved into crescent moons, and he said, "There are indeed a few pretty good seedlings. The top genius disciples of the three major sects outside all came to the testing plaza that I'm in to take the test. Especially the myriad sword sect's monstrous palm tree. He actually reached the initial stage Empyrean realm, and his age is merely 23 years old. There's also Cold Moon Palace's Shike and Yellow Mystic sects Huang Xian, both at the peak of the Golden Exalt realm. These three people are considered the strongest in my group." Initial stage Empyrean realm? Cheng Dong's face slightly stiffened. He also did not expect that in the testing plaza where Hu Jia was, there would actually be a peerless monster in the early stage of the Empyrean realm. "Looks like your group is comparable to Qi Ji's group?" Cheng Dong's gaze landed on another group of people without leaving a trace. The leader of that group of people had delicate features, slender limbs, and carried an ancient sword on his back. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, and stood there like a sharp sword. This person was the person in charge of the other plaza, Qi Ji. Sword cultivator? Zhuowen, who was standing in the middle of the group, focused his gaze on Qi Ji, who was standing on the other side of the open space without saying a word. The aura on Qi Ji's body was very sharp. His entire person was like an unsheathed sharp sword. He had seen this aura from Jianmu in the desolate ancient city, but Qi Ji's sharp aura was completely inferior to Jianmu's. The person was like a sword, and a sword was like a person. His entire body emitted a sharp sword-like aura. This was a realm that only sword cultivators could reach. On the other hand, sword cultivators were good at attacking. They were able to defeat the strong as the weak and challenge the strong. Although they were not as terrifying as devil cultivators, they were much stronger than ordinary warriors. This Qi Ji's aura was even stronger than Hu Jia and Cheng Dong's. His strength was probably even above Cheng Dong and Hu Jia's. Hu Jia curled his lips and said somewhat unhappily, "It can only be said that Qi Ji's luck is too good." The Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's Crown Prince Yun Zhongyang and the Alcate Holy Dynasty's Yuan Zhao and Yuan Kong, these three monstrous geniuses, have all gone to the testing plaza where he is. Cheng Dong nodded, a trace of gloominess in his eyes. Among the two groups of people that Qi Ji and Hu Jia were in charge of, there were peerless geniuses. Only the plaza that he was in charge of didn't have a single one. The strongest ones were the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's Blue Smoke and Burning Flame Holy Dynasty's Fenji, who were both in the late stage of Golden Venerable Realm. It could be said that the quality of the people he was in charge of was far inferior to the geniuses that Hu Jia and Qi Ji were in charge of. Thinking of this, the corner of Cheng Dong's mouth was filled with a bitter smile. Cheng Dong, among the people you're in charge of, there should also be peerless geniuses, right? Introduce them to me. Hu Jia's beautiful eyes turned slightly and immediately landed on the people behind Cheng Dong and asked curiously. Qi Ji, who was standing on the other side of the open space, also cast his gaze towards Cheng Dong. He was also somewhat curious about the lineup of people that Cheng Dong was in charge of, and whether or not they could surpass the quality of his group. Cheng Dong's face stiffened, his eyes flickered, and he sighed. Let's be honest. The quality of the people I'm in charge of is completely incomparable to you and Qi Ji. In the group I'm in charge of, the strongest and most talented should be Blue Smoke of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty and Fenji of the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty. These two people's cultivations are in the late stage of Golden Venerable Realm. Chapter 964. Iron Man Cave. Hu Jia's beautiful eyes slightly narrowed. She did not expect that in the group of people that Cheng Dong was in charge of, the strongest was only at the late stage of the Golden Exalt Realm. Qi Ji was also stunned for a moment, then his gaze regained its coldness and he no longer looked over. Without a doubt, among the three groups of people, only Cheng Dong's group was of the worst quality, and it was even more impossible for them to compete with the group he was in charge of. Cheng Dong, maybe you didn't observe carefully. There might be a peerless monster in your group, but that guy likes to hide his cultivation, so you didn't see through it. Hu Jia didn't know what to say, and could only use this completely unreliable reason to comfort Cheng Dong. Of course, even she herself didn't believe this reason. The opportunity to enter Jiaxin Academy was so rare, how could there be anyone hiding their cultivation? Wasn't that just courting death? Cheng Dong smiled bitterly, but did not point it out. He only nodded and said, I hope so. Zhuan, who was standing in the middle of the group, narrowed his eyes, because he realized that there were a few familiar faces in the group that Hu Jia was in charge of. The people from the Qingxian Empire really came. Zhuan muttered to himself. In the group of people behind Hu Jia, 5 of them were recognized by Zhuan at a glance. They were Gran Baihe, Zhu Bai, and Huangfu Wuji. Guosheng and Murong Zhan respectively replaced Huangfu Wudao, Zhuan, and Qingyan's positions. Zhuan only took a glance, then retracted his gaze, his face full of calmness. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Suddenly, sounds of breaking through the air came from behind the cliff in front of them. Soon after, they floated above the empty space. The auras of these 4 people were extremely strong, not at all weaker than Xiang Tianzuan. They were actually 4 peak Empyrean experts. The 4 of them were not young, around 40 or 50 years old. The skin on their faces was slightly wrinkled. Of course, with the lifespan and realm of martial warriors, these 4 people were definitely much older than they looked. Greetings to the 4 instructors. Cheng Dong, Hu Jia, and Qi Ji respectfully cupped their hands towards the 4 old men in the sky. The 4 elders nodded. Then, a tall and skinny elder stepped forward. He looked down at the people in the open space and said loudly, The 3 of you, divide these 30,000 people into 4 groups. They are the Mystique Sovereign Group, the Sovereign Group, the Golden Sovereign Group, and the Heavenly Sovereign Group. The 3 of them were startled at first. Soon after, they each went to the group they were in charge of and began to choose. Divide yourselves into 4 groups, Mystique Venerable, Supreme Venerable, Golden Venerable, and Heavenly Venerable. Qi Ji and Hu Jia each shouted to the people they were in charge of behind them. Then, the people they were in charge of started to stand in line. Cheng Dong, on the other hand, was a little helpless, because there were no Empyrean monsters in the group he was in charge of. He could only say weakly, You guys can divide yourselves into 3 groups, Mystique Venerable, Supreme Venerable, and Golden Venerable. Not long after, the three groups of people finished standing. Among the nearly 30,000 martial warriors, there were only 3 people who were able to reach the Empyrean realm before the age of 25. They were the Yaoguang Sacred Dynasty's Yuan Zhao, the Blue Whale Sacred Dynasty's Crown Prince Yun Zhongyang, and the Myriad Sword Sect's Palm Tree. There weren't many golden venerable realm cultivators, only a dozen or so of them. Compared to the 30,000 people, it could be said to be incomparably rare. Most of them were from the Xuanzuan realm and the Supreme realm. Among them, the Xuanzuan realm accounted for 2/3 of them, and the rest were from the Supreme realm. The quality of the students recruited this time is not bad. The 4 old men's sharp gazes fell on the 3 Empyrean geniuses, and there was a trace of satisfaction on their faces. In the past, it was already considered good if there was 1 Empyrean genius in the recruitment process, but this time, there were 3 of them. The 4 old men were naturally delighted. After all, if a cultivator who reached the Empyrean realm before the age of 25 was properly nurtured, advancing to the Emperor realm would not be a problem. Now, let's begin the second stage of the test. The second stage of the test is called the Iron Man Cave. The steep cliff behind me is the location of the test. The tall and thin old man pointed at the cliff behind him and said loudly. Everyone's eyes followed the old man's direction and shifted to the cliff. However, their eyes were filled with doubt. It was clearly an ordinary cliff, and there was no cave on it. The Iron Man Cave, as the name suggested, was definitely a cave. However, the cliff was as smooth as a mirror. How could there be a cave? However, the crowd's doubts didn't last long because the 4 old men floating in the air made hand seals at the same time. A terrifying aura surged out, and then a series of light talismans rushed toward the cliff in front of them like ropes. Gotcha! Suddenly, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the huge cliff, and then 4 huge caves that were hundreds of feet wide appeared on the surface of the cliff. Moreover, the crowd noticed that there was a sturdy figure standing at the entrance of each cave. Upon closer inspection, they weren't real people at all, but strange humanoid figures that were covered with countless iron plates. They were at least 10 feet tall and looked very terrifying. These are the Iron Men guarding the caves. You have seen the 4 caves. From left to right, they are divided into 4 levels: the Xuanzuan realm, the Supreme realm, the Golden realm, and the Empyrean realm. You can choose a cave that matches your cultivation. Once you pass, you will pass the second stage of the test. There are many mechanisms in the Iron Man Cave. Once you pass through the Iron Man Cave and reach the entrance of the cave, you will pass the second stage of the test. You can continue to participate in the third stage of the test. Of course, there are also good opportunities in the Iron Man Cave. There are armor techniques, spiritual treasures, spiritual herbs, spiritual stones, and other resources. If you have the ability to break through, you can obtain all of them. Treat them as a gift from the students. At this point, the skinny old man stopped and looked at the crowd quietly. As soon as he said that, everyone's eyes lit up with excitement. If what the skinny old man said was true, then the resources hidden in the Iron Man Cave wouldn't be bad. In other words, if they were strong enough, they could obtain all the benefits in the cave. Senior, since the Iron Man Cave is divided into 4 levels, does it mean that the things in each level are different? The Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's Crown Prince, Yun Zhongyang, suddenly stepped forward and asked. Yun Zhongyang was a young man whose eyes were filled with pride and arrogance. His body exuded a strong sense of confidence, which had reached the point of conceit. Compared to the arrogant Yun Zhongyang, the Myriad Sword Sect's Palm Tree was much more normal. His expression was calm, and his eyes revealed a hint of sharpness. On the other hand, the Alcade Holy Dynasty's Crown Prince, Yuan Zhao, had an ordinary appearance. His face was ordinary, and he was dressed in gray cotton clothes. He was the most inconspicuous of the 3. The skinny old man nodded approvingly and said, "You're right. Since the Iron Man Cave is divided into 4 levels, it naturally goes from easy to difficult. Mystique Venerables are the easiest, and the resources inside are the worst. Heavenly Venerables are the hardest, and the resources inside are naturally the best." As expected, Zhuowen thought inwardly. Since the Iron Man cave was divided into difficult and easy levels, the resources inside would naturally be divided into good and bad. Of course, if someone is confident in his cultivation, he can also challenge the Iron Man cave that is one level higher than him. However, there is only one chance. If he fails, he will be directly eliminated. Therefore, this old man advises everyone to know their own limits. Otherwise, you will miss the opportunity to enter the outer court. As soon as the old man said that, some cultivators who were eager to give it a try felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over them, and their hearts gradually cooled down. There was only one chance for this kind of challenge. If they tried to challenge the Iron Man cave that was higher than them and failed, they would be directly eliminated. For some cultivators with decent strength, it would be an extreme pity. I'll try the Sovereign Iron Man cave. Suddenly, a figure rushed out from the crowd and instantly rushed to the entrance of the second cave. This person was young, about 20 years old, and his cultivation had reached the peak of the Xuanzuan realm. He was probably coveting the resources behind the Sovereign Iron Man cave. Flood Dragon entering the sea. As soon as the young man came up, he used a powerful armor technique. Terrifying origin energy surged out and turned into a vast ocean around him. Then, a huge flood dragon descended from the sky and swooped down, pouncing on the sturdy Iron Man cave. The Iron Man cave slowly turned his head and stared at the flood dragon in silence. However, the huge axe on his shoulder chopped down with a sharp edge. Puchi! The huge flood dragon was chopped into pieces by the huge axe before it could even get close to the Iron Man cave. Then, the huge axe's momentum did not change, and it actually swept straight towards the young man. The young man was so shocked that he quickly used his armor spirit. Sizzle! The young man's armor soul was a huge python. Its scarlet tongue flickered in and out of its mouth, and its triangular eyes were extremely cold and sinister. However, the Iron Man cave's huge axe still carried an indomitable momentum. He did not have any scruples about the terrifying python at all. As long as it was in his way, he would cut it down without exception. Puchi! What was shocking was that even though the young man had used his armor spirit was still unable to withstand a single blow. It was chopped into countless pieces by the huge axe, and countless blood rained down from the sky. The young man did not even let out a groan as he was chopped into two halves by the huge axe. There was no luck at all. This, gasps could be heard. A genius at the peak of the Xuanzuan realm had died in front of everyone just like that. The Iron Man cave did not show any mercy at all. Didn't this old man just say that we should act according to our strength? This person did not know his own strength, so he deserved to die. Of course, this old man also forgot to mention that the Iron Man cave will not show any mercy. If you can't pass and are killed by him, you can only blame yourselves. Looking at the young man who had been beheaded, the thin and tall old man was expressionless as he explained unhurriedly. However, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Before the young man died, the thin and tall old man didn't explain it clearly. After the young man died in the hands of the Iron Man, he slowly explained it. Obviously, this was done deliberately by the old man. He was waiting for someone to stand out like the young man just now, so that he could make an example out of the others. Of course, if anyone is not confident, you can choose an Iron Man cave that is one level lower than you. It will be much safer that way, the old man suddenly added. However, most of the people present were proud geniuses who thought highly of themselves. How could they choose an Iron Man cave that was lower than them? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.